civilians. And Israel is betting big on the future of biology, and a new report shows that investment is already paying off. More on this from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
Nearly 1 billion shekels has been invested in Israel's national bioconvergence program over the past 3 years, according to a new report from the Israel Innovation Authority, positioning the country at the forefront of a rapidly growing global field. The program brings together biology, engineering, and artificial intelligence to develop new solutions across healthcare, food production, energy, and advanced manufacturing. Today, nearly 200 companies are operating in the space, roughly double the number from just 5 years ago. At the heart of the effort is a coordinated national strategy, combining government funding, private investment, and academic research to create what officials describe as a new economic growth engine.
Biology gives us many more solutions than before and allows us to be more efficient and more accurate and more economically viable than ever before.
The report highlights a surge in private sector involvement, alongside major investments in research infrastructure and diverse multidisciplinary consortia, working on everything from gene editing to cultivated meat and disease detection. Israel has also gained global attention, with organizations like the World Economic Forum and OECD adopting elements of its approach as a model for other countries.
And Israel is a relatively small player in volume, but a very high power player in the quality and the agility of how we bring products and processes to the market.
Regulatory advances are helping startups move faster, with Israel among the first countries to approve cultivated food products and advance cutting-edge medical technologies. Officials say the long-term commitment to research and development is key to sustaining momentum and attracting further international collaboration.
We're trying to capitalize as much as we can and bring forth these joint solutions on a global level.
As global demand for bio-based solutions grows, Israel is aiming to leverage its scientific and technological strengths to compete with much larger economies.
I think that's a signal for a new wave of technological collaboration, which should be and is global, and we're thankful for that.
With billions being invested worldwide in what many call the bioeconomy, Israel is positioning itself not just to participate, but to lead.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Caleb Ben David, coming to you live from Israel with all of the headline stories from here and across the region. It's 2 p.m. here in Israel, 7 a.m. in New York. Here are the latest developments. Well, despite the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah that was announced by President Trump on Thursday night, 2 IDF soldiers were killed this weekend and about a dozen wounded in 2 separate incidents in South Lebanon. One of the fallen was named as Reserve Sergeant First Class Lidor Parat, 31 years old, from Ashdod. Parat was killed, 9 others wounded, including one seriously, after being hit by an explosive device in South Lebanon on Saturday. In a separate incident, Reserve's Warrant Officer Barak Kalfon, 48 years old, from Adi, was killed while conducting a search for weapons in a building in South Lebanon when an explosive device there detonated. The blast killed Kalfon and wounded 3 other troops. Well, may their memories be a blessing. But even with those incidents, the U.S. brokered 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah has largely been holding, with no rockets fired from Lebanon across the border since midnight Thursday. Lebanon's army accused Israel of breaking the ceasefire with limited shelling in several southern villages. The IDF says soldiers identified a terrorist cell that violated the ceasefire understandings and approached troops who were operating south of the defense line. The terrorists posed a threat to the troops, and in response, the IDF eliminated them. Additionally struck was an underground shaft in the area south of the forward defense line, and Hezbollah terrorists who were identified entering it were struck. Well, in the final 24 hours before the ceasefire, the IDF said it hit more than 380 Hezbollah targets in South Lebanon, including operatives' command centers and rocket launchers. Now, posting the announcement of the ceasefire, President Trump raised some eyebrows here in Israel when he announced that Israel has been banned from targeting Lebanon. Trump wrote, quote, "The USA will separately work with Lebanon and deal with the Hezbollah situation in an appropriate manner. Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the USA. Enough is enough." Well, President Trump called the ceasefire a potentially historic moment and said he will, at an unspecified date, host Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Lebanese President Joseph Aoun at the White House for talks aimed at a permanent peace agreement.
With Lebanon, it's very exciting. I think we're going to have a deal. We're going to have a meeting, first time in 44 years, and Lebanon will be meeting with Israel, and they're probably going to do it at the White House.
Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it remains on high alert and fully ready to resume fighting in Lebanon if the current fragile ceasefire collapses or expires without extension on April 22nd. Well, from the moment the ceasefire took effect, thousands of displaced Lebanese families have been flooding southern highways this weekend, attempting to return home. Israeli forces, as we said, remain deployed in South Lebanon and continue to warn civilians not to return to frontline areas, despite this mass movements of people heading south. Defense Minister Israel Katz said that IDF troops will remain in frontline positions in South Lebanon for the time being.
צה"ל אוחז וימשיך לאחוז בכל המקומות אותם תיאר וכבש. מהלך התמרון הקרקעי לתוך לבנון ותקיפת החיזבאללה בכל רחבי לבנון השיגו הישגים רבים, אבל עדיין לא הושלמו. היעד אותו הגדרנו, פירוק החיזבאללה מנשקו באמצעים צבאיים או מדיניים, היה ונותר יעד המערכה לא אנו מחויבים, כאשר כעת נוצר גם מנוף מדיני משמעותי במעורבות ישירה של נשיא ארצות הברית ומחויבותו ליעד הזה, תוך הפעלת לחץ על ממשלת לבנון.
And with ceasefires now holding both on the Lebanese and Iranian fronts, the Home Front Command has eased all restrictions on sporting and cultural events in Israel beginning last night. The decision means full activity resumes nationwide, with the public returning to stadiums, performance venues, and events without wartime limitations. Now, the announcement comes just days before Israel's Memorial Day and Independence Day commemorations, which comes on this Tuesday and Wednesday. And on the Iran front, a second round of U.S.-Iran peace talks is expected to take place as early as Monday in Islamabad, this according to Iranian sources cited by CNN. While Washington has not officially confirmed the meeting, President Trump has said Tehran has agreed to give up its highly enriched uranium and expressed confidence a deal can be reached in the coming days. The two-week ceasefire is due to end on Wednesday, April 22nd, which is also when Israel celebrates its Independence Day. According to Trump, Iran has also agreed to stop funding Hamas and Hezbollah and to hand over its uranium stockpile. A Pakistani mediator said back-channel talks have made progress, with a memorandum of understanding possible soon and a comprehensive deal within 60 days.
We had to do something. We had to make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. And we're at that. They've agreed to that. They've totally agreed to that. They've agreed to almost everything. So maybe if they can get to the table, there's a difference. They agree. They're going to get to the table with a pen. We'll have that over with.
But Iranian officials dispute President Trump's claims, saying his tweets and statements are misleading or in some cases just inaccurate.
American side tweets a lot, talks a lot, sometimes confusing, sometimes contradictory. In the same statement, he said other things as well. So I don't want to judge what he means. It is up to American, and American people should decide whether his statements are consistent and are in accordance with the international law or not.
Meanwhile, President Trump is meeting with top advisors to discuss Iran's renewed closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The urgent consultations come after Iran swiftly reversed its earlier decision to reopen the critical waterway, reimposing restrictions following U.S. declarations that it would maintain a blockade on Iran-linked shipping. In what is being referred to as Hormuz whiplash, there have been a rapid sequence of reversals over the Strait of Hormuz as Iran shifted from announcing open transit to reimposing restrictions within hours, creating widespread uncertainty over one of the world's most critical shipping lanes. The timeline began Friday afternoon when the Iranian foreign minister announced that the strait would be open to all vessels during the ceasefire period, a statement immediately welcomed by President Trump. Within hours, some shipping activity resumed, with tankers beginning to transit the waterway for the first time in weeks. However, by Saturday, Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya Command, which is responsible for military operations, reversed course and announced that the strait was once again under strict Iranian control, effectively restoring restrictions on free passage. According to reports, at least 20 vessels that were preparing to transit through the strait turned back following the announcement, highlighting the immediate impact on maritime traffic. President Trump says Iran, quote, got a little cute by again closing the Strait of Hormuz, even as he insists diplomatic talks with Tehran are working out really well. Speaking at the White House, Trump said the U.S. is in active contact with Iranian officials and expect to have further information shortly.
We'll be talking about Iran later. We have very good conversations going on. It's working out very well. They got a little cute, as they have been doing for 47 years, and nobody ever took them on. We took them on. They have no Navy, they have no Air Force, they have no leaders, they have no nothing. Actually, their leaders it is regime change. You call that enforced regime change. But we're talking to them. They wanted to close up the strait again, as they've been doing for years, and they can't blackmail us.
Finally, in other diplomatic news, Argentina's President Javier Milei has arrived in Israel for a 3-day visit. It's his third visit here in 3 years. Milei, a staunch defender of Israel, has been chosen to light one of the ceremonial torches during Israel's official Independence Day opening celebration on Tuesday night. It's an honor that is rarely given to foreigners. Milei will also visit Jerusalem's Western Wall Shrine today and hold meetings with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other officials, and announce a new direct flight route between Ben Gurion Airport and Buenos Aires. And now joining us for comment on most of these issues is retired IDF Brigadier General Amir Avivi, founder of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, also known in Israel as Habitchonistim, and we have also Iftach Berman, a geopolitics expert at the Middle East Learning Academy and Bar Ilan University. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. General Avivi, Amir, I want to start with you. Those of us who watch your Telegraph channel know that you feel the mission, despite the ceasefire with Hezbollah and these talks with Lebanon, the mission is far from completed. What is the mission? What has to be done here with Lebanon and Hezbollah?
Well, as the overall goal, as the Minister of Defense stated again, is to dismantle Hezbollah. This is very, very clear. I think that we're witnessing like a tectonic shift, an understanding regionally and an understanding in the Lebanese government that the Iranian hegemony has ended. It's clear that Iran will not going to be a major force anymore in the region, and certainly not in Lebanon. And therefore, the Lebanese government is looking at a vision of joining the Abraham Accords and being part of this alliance that will emerge and will grow after the war. And this is good news. And the fact that they want to have talks with Israel directly, this is great news. The only problem is that they have almost zero capability of dismantling Hezbollah, and it's unclear how we're going to move to reach this goal. And probably Israel will have to go back and deal with this because Hezbollah is not going to dismantle itself by itself. I think Hezbollah is also going to challenge the Lebanese government and maybe even conduct attacks or target leaders. It's not going to go down in history quietly. And we understand that as long as Hezbollah is not dismantled, assessment is that Israel will not retreat in any way, will remain in the 10 kilometers perimeter we created and defend our towns from a ground invasion or from anti-tank missiles. And this is not going to change. When we are fighting now in this area, we see the extent of the capabilities that Hezbollah put in all this area, and the challenge that it poses on our citizens and on the army. And therefore, Hezbollah will have to dismantle at a certain point. Part of it depends on the Lebanese government, on us, but also on what's happening in Iran, because the funding, the guidance, the technology, the equipment, everything comes from Iran. At the end of the day, what's happening in Pakistan and the talks will define also the future of Hezbollah.
And Iftach, certainly the IDF, as Amir has said, has continued to remain its forward positions in South Lebanon. It is taking on Hezbollah even during this ceasefire. But there has to be a role for the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army. I mean, Hezbollah can always retreat further into Lebanon above the Litani. There have been international efforts to strengthen the government and the military there, so it feels in a confident position. What is the role of the U.S. and perhaps other international players as well in the process that Amir has just described?
It's interesting to look at our counterpart, the counterpart to the Israeli ambassador in negotiations with Lebanon. Ambassador Muawid Hamada, a Druze ambassador married to a Lebanese Christian. She first got her appointment as the ambassador of Lebanon to the United States with a clear mandate to try and bolster the Lebanese military, the Lebanese army, armed forces, the LAF, in order to help the military, the Lebanese military, deal with Hezbollah on the day after. That means that the Lebanese are expecting the U.S. to supply not just budgetary means for the Lebanese army to deal with Hezbollah, but also a plan. Lebanon is highly complex, and you see these different sectarian elements in all of the government of Lebanon, whether it's with the Druze ambassador, but also with the Lebanese army. One of the biggest challenges for this army is that entire divisions within the army of Lebanon are Shia. It's almost entirely, whether it's the 6th Division and 12th Division and others. And these divisions cannot be responsible to dismantle their own next of kin within Hezbollah armed forces. So there has to be some sort of a mechanism developed, and what we're seeing both sides trying right now is to get some time to develop such a mechanism, some sort of a postponement, and to detach between the two major elements or conflicts between Iran and Lebanon, not to have that link between the two subjects, and in that way to get Hezbollah to give up one of its stronger leverages, the Iranian attacks. And once the Iranian issue is resolved, hopefully, peacefully, the Lebanese Hezbollah can be dismantled as well.
Right. And Amir, the processes that you and Iftach have described certainly sound reasonable, but you hear the anguish of those residents of northern Israel saying, in the meantime, we're suffering, we're still living in this condition of either running to shelters, being near shelters. What kind of timeline are we talking about here for these for this process to develop, and how and what can Israel do, or the government, to help the residents of the north during this whole process?
Well, I think that, by the fact that the IDF is deep in South Lebanon and in a buffer zone defending the citizens, this is a big deal. And it gives security. It's not a solution for rockets that can be shot from North Lebanon, but it's definitely a big change. And Israel has to say crystal clear, if Hezbollah is not dismantled, we'll stay there even forever. Might be our new border in the future. Instead of South Lebanon, the North Galilee. So this might be a reality that will develop if there won't be any change in the Lebanese government. But as Iftach mentioned, if the USA will actually assist dramatically budget-wise and also helping build rightly the forces, changing the chief of staff, because the chief of staff of this Lebanese army is completely in favor of Hezbollah. It's not the right guy to lead such a change. You need some changes there. It is a process. It's a process, and it's completely linked also to the issue of Iran Iran has funded Hezbollah with huge amounts of money, billions in 2025, and this needs to stop. Once you disconnect Iran from Hezbollah and there is no funding and no munitions and capabilities, this by itself can create the terms for dismantling Hezbollah. So the outcome of what will happen with Iran, and even maybe in the future a change of regime, will impact dramatically also Lebanon.
Right. But Iftach, I have to ask you, we'll discuss the Iranian situation more in depth in a moment, but in terms of, for example, Iran not funding or supplying Hezbollah, the whole issue of Iran supporting its regional proxy seems to have become less of a priority, for example, for the U.S. administration than some other issues. And certainly the tone of President Trump's tweet where he says Israel will stop bombing Lebanon, I won't permit that, raised some eyebrows here in Israel, some questions about how committed the U.S. is going to be to allowing Israel the freedom of action in Lebanon against Hezbollah if, for example, it continues to refuse to disarm. How do you see the U.S. position here, as well as those like the Special Envoy Tom Barrack, who has been also made comments that have been raised concerns here in Israel?
Well, you have to consider that what President Trump is saying, the way he's expressing himself, it's all part of the negotiations with Iran, and it has to be understood in that context. But you can be sure that the administration, the American government, is really putting a lot of hard work into dismantling the organization in many different ways. Whether we see efforts in Venezuela to bring down the drug operations and trafficking there, we're seeing operations in Central Africa and West Africa. There's work being done against Hezbollah's finances worldwide, and this is a major issue because, yes, once you can stop the funding coming from Iran, and we understand that since the beginning of 2025, Iran has funneled more than $1 billion toward Hezbollah, but that's not the only source of funding for this organization. That's not the only way they're buying rockets, sophisticated missiles, and so on, and parts for their drones and UAVs. They're also counterfeiting currencies. They're also smuggling blood diamonds. They're dealing with luxury commodities and so on and so forth. And this has to be dealt with in an international effort with several countries that already have done many things. For instance, Kuwait has announced it dismantled a 24-man network just recently that was funneling through religious institutions money towards Hezbollah, but also, I'm sorry to say, elements that have not taken a step up in their actions against Hezbollah, like the EU, to prevent money coming into Hezbollah's elements worldwide.
I want to move on. We just brought up Iran in the context of Lebanon, but let's look at what is actually developing there. Mir, are you concerned by when you hear, again, it's President Trump saying there has been regime change in Iran, certainly a position not many in Israel would agree with this, and the fact that while he does remain rightly focused on the nuclear issue, which is the key issue for Israel, some of the other Israeli concerns, like supporting proxies, like the ballistic missile program, like the nature of the regime itself, have seemed to have been downplayed with more focus on other areas, like reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which was open prior to that war. So how's your feeling about how these negotiations are going?
Yeah, first of all, I must say that being deeply concerned is a European issue. I'm never deeply concerned, and I'm optimistic. So I think there is a resolution in the American administration to reach the goals of war. I mean, think about it. 2 months ago, before the war, the U.S. put very, very clear terms to the Iranians what they need to do. They need to give up all their nuclear plans, dismantle the ballistic missiles, stop supporting their proxies, all of that. And the Iranians refused. And the U.S. went to war for that. They went to war. And they won decisively. Now we're coming back to exactly the same discussion. only with one small difference. Iran has been hit in an almost biblical way. And they're coming to this discussion very, very weak. And 21 hours into the discussion, the moment they didn't agree to the terms, you have a blockade. Now, I hear people saying, the war is over. What is over? I mean, doing a maritime blockade on a country is one of the most, the strongest things you can do in a war. 90% of their goods are coming through the sea, the export, the import, and they're being blockaded. It's dramatic. How long can they stay like that in a blockade where at the beginning of this war already they were in a terrible economical shape? So the U.S. is putting maximum pressure on them and is not going to give up. And at any given moment, and the president said that he can go back and do dramatic things like attacking their electrical plants and really shutting down this country entirely. So there is no reason why the U.S. should give up any of the demands. And I think they are going to really stay strong on what they want, on the things they want to happen. And nothing changed. It's the same demands from the very beginning. And the Iranians don't really have too much cards to deal with this. So maybe they're a bit disrupting almost. But the U.S., if they want to, they're amassing more and more and more forces in the area. They can deal with this. They just need to take a decision. They have Marines, they have Division 82 and other forces they brought to the area. And they can decide at any given moment that they can go back to military actions, a part of the blockade, and deal with what's left with the Iranian capabilities. So I think Israel and the U.S. are very aligned, talking about the goals. And yes, the U.S. is focusing first and foremost on the nuclear issue. It's critical. Doesn't mean that they gave up the other issues.
All right. Well, I want to get your response to it, if you agree with Amir. But also, how likely then do you see the Iranian regime, whether it's changed or not? It certainly doesn't sound like it's changed. Whether, for example, the blows they suffered and the economic pressure that's being put on them by the blockade could lead to them finally making some serious concessions, especially on the nuclear issue, removal of that enriched uranium material and agreeing to stop enrichment, at least for an extended period of time.
Well, seeing a back and forth here and the negotiations between the two sides, and sometimes we hear things being made public that we interpret differently or standing alone, but it's actually all a part of the negotiation itself. When Iran announced it's reapplying its Strait of Hormuz siege or barricade, it was something that responded to the negotiation going on in the inner room. So we cannot take things out of context. But I do see Amir having a very strong point about that. I do see the U.S. taking possibly another on-the-ground move. President Trump really got a good experience with the operation to rescue the pilot that was stranded. There were no casualties in that operation. There was activation of a very large ground force, and I think he maybe got a taste for more. So at this point, he's no longer shy of handling another ground operation. Maybe we'll see a seizing of the island of Chag, maybe other assets along the Iranian coastline. But this is all a part of the negotiation. The military efforts are very much a part of the end goal. And I think that this regime will eventually give more than right now it's willing to admit. However, if we're looking at the long run, and if we're looking at regime changes in Iran, I think this is something that will have to be judged in years process, maybe even more, and to see what the Iranian people bring to the table eventually, whether it's a new leadership, whether it's defection of any military leaders from the Iranian military, or possibly even the IRGC. And let me remind us that we have still not seen any action on the ground by the dissident militias, the Baluchis, the Kurds, and possibly this is because it clashes with American interests with Turkey. And so any action by the Kurdish resistance is prevented at this point. But again, with time, with the end of negotiations with the US, we possibly will see more action on the ground after it's all said and done.
Right. Speaking of the long-term, gentlemen, the war with Iran, the U.S. war of Iran has really put forward the issue of U.S.-Israeli military cooperation, U.S. military assistance and aid to Israel, sort of on the front burner of the American political debate. We just saw over the past week a vote in Congress and the Senate to try to deny Israel not only just weapons, but even defense, what we call defensive weapons like Iron Dome, a measure defeated because some Democrat senators sided with the Republican majority, but there were a number of Democrats that kind of supported that. Amir, how worrying a trend should this be for Israel, and what should it be looking to in terms of trying to deal with this going forward? I mean, certainly even in the post-Trump era, which is really not that far off if you just look at the real calendar.
I think that what we can see looking at the last 2 decades is that each time there is a change of administration, especially from Republicans to Democrats and vice versa, there is sometimes a complete change of policy. Something we haven't seen before to such an extent. It's not only impacting Israel, it's impacting countries like Saudi Arabia and other countries that see suddenly changes of alliances and shift of policies. And for Israel, I think it's crystal clear that Israel must be able to defend itself by itself. It needs to be sovereign. It has the energy independence, ammunition independence, and strong military industries. We can never know what's next. And having said that, we have to deepen the relations with the U.S. based on real interests, not just ideology or democracy, and this is working together on core technologies like AI and quantum computing and hypersonic missiles or cyber. And also the idea of creating this global regional alliance, this Western Israeli moderate Sunni alliance that will extend all the way to Indonesia and creating new routes of trade that will go through Israel. This creates realities that can be sustainable for the very long term. And this is why it's so important to push these ideas that can really stand even changes of administration and different parties taking over in the U.S.
Pick up on that point because, as you mentioned, this unprecedented with what's going on with Lebanon is kind of unprecedented. With the Lebanese president now on the verge of meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Syria will likely be involved at some point when it comes to the border issue, and of course the change in the Gulf states, not even Saudi Arabia, which had been anticipated, but countries like Qatar. How do you see that in the long term impacting diplomatic for Israel regionally as the war progresses or even as it concludes?
It's important to think back at one of the things mentioned back in the first attack of Iran on Israel. That was back in April 24. And the words that were uttered were a NATO-like aerial defense alliance between Israel, Arab countries, Gulf countries, and all coordinated through CENTCOM. And this is the future of the Abraham Accords. When we're talking about cooperation between Israel, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and Jordan, and these countries are interested in the same things Israel's interested in. Yes, it starts with tourism and education and exchange of information and technology, but eventually we all want to keep this region calm and safe for everyone. And so this is something that these countries can align themselves and cooperate on. So when we're looking at the conferences that are made in Kiryat Gat, where different generals from different armies are coming together, I the day is not very far where a Qatari general with a UAE and a Saudi general will stand shoulder to shoulder with an Israeli general in Kiryat Gat to coordinate the efforts for a calmer region, whether it's in Iran, whether it's in Gaza or Lebanon or Syria. But it's based on mutual interests and has to be transparent and has to look at the long vision in 2050, not 2027.
All right. The expression in New Middle East has become a bit of a cliche over the last few decades, but I think you'd have to say that this war is certainly reshaping the region in ways that we really haven't even started to take stock of yet, and we'll have to see how it all plays out. Iftach Berman, General Amir Avivi from the Bitronis team, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we did discuss the plight, the situation of the residents of northern Israel, maybe having a brief break now from the sirens and rocket attacks, but unfortunately, questions being raised how brief that is, and when are they going to get some permanent relief? Well, for more, let's go to one of those residents in the north, Josiah Decano, who's been with us before. Josiah, thank you for joining us. Well, our first discussion since the start of the ceasefire, let me get your reaction to that development, that of your feelings and your neighbors in the north. What do you make of this ceasefire? I'm putting that in air quotes.
Right. Well, thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
thank you
perfect.
for having me. I got to tell you that the people of the north are very skeptical of the word ceasefire, right? So November 24th, we had hope of dismantling Hezbollah and actually having a true peace, right? And peace is not going to come by us making concessions with a terrorist organization. What does ceasefire mean? Sort of frightens us in the north. Last time it meant going back to a status quo and having 100,000 rockets on our border pointed towards us. Now we've made some real ground, and we have soldiers like a mile behind me or 2 miles behind me, and the word ceasefire sort of frightens us a bit, right? We feel like we had hope for a true peace, and that's going to come by dismantling this terrorist organization. So that's sort of where we are. I mean, it's very nice for it to be quiet here for the first time in over a month, but we are skeptical.
Right. I want to ask you a question about a kind of little debate that was Israel was engaged in prior to the ceasefire, and I think it's still certainly in the back of a lot of our minds, which is about whether the rest of Israel should be holding Independence Day, for example, celebrations or events of municipalities, which were permitted by Home Front Command even prior to this ceasefire. I'm talking about everywhere south of, in central and southern Israel. And right. The question of whether that was appropriate when people in the north are still in this situation. And actually, the government did not restrict those celebrations. They left it up to the municipalities, even while plenty of people were saying, how could you even think about that when residents in the north are unable to have that kind of a large gathering on Independence Day because of the fear of sirens? I mean, how did you feel about that? I mean, how did that leave was that an issue that you thought about or maybe even discussed there up with your residents in the north?
So I can tell you that my wife teaches English at one of the high schools, and she's been doing Zoom meetings for the last month or, since this conflict started. And there would be rumors of going back to school on the same day that we would see rockets are being launched for that school. And so that was, it was quite frightening. Speaking personally, I would rejoice if we want to celebrate Independence Day. I would rejoice if the rest of the country was able to. So we know we've taken the brunt of things. We've taken the brunt. We knew when the discussion started about going to war with Iran, we knew that Hezbollah was going to get involved, and we were willing to take that in hopes for deliberation and freedom for the Iranian people and what that would mean to this whole region. And so we were willing to take that. I think personally, I don't think anybody up here begrudges our brothers from being able to celebrate it if we're not. We're looking forward to celebrating it now ourselves.
Right. And since you mentioned the education system, schools did reopen, but in the Syria of Kiryat Shmona, the municipality went on a one-day strike to do a march to Jerusalem. The Yoav Kish, the education minister, criticizing that decision. How do you feel about that? Do the residents of the north feel the government? Obviously, there are conditions, elements beyond the control of any Israeli government in order to bring the situation back to normal there. A lot depends on what's going on with Lebanon and Hezbollah. But do the residents feel that their needs are being taken care of, even in their short-term needs, by the government?
My wife is talking about, she actually has to go back to class on Tuesday.
Okay.
And this is the first time. So she's talking about that with hesitation, but the Zoom meeting classroom things have been, we kept people moving forward, but it isn't as good as, being face to face. She's eager to get back and see the faces of these people. I personally have confidence that we still have IDF soldiers over there, which has created a buffer between us. We talked before in the October 7th war,
right.
We had 8 seconds to get to a bomb shelter. Now with the progress that the IDF has made, we have 15 seconds to get to a bomb shelter. That may not sound like a lot, but that means your kids can be on the swing if you're out there ready to run, right? We have confidence that Israel is on extremely high alert. And I think as long as my wife makes the 35-minute drive, they will be very cautious. And I think she'll be happy to see her students face to face.
But is there a kind of breaking point that if the situation doesn't resolve itself into something that will look more like a permanent, I won't say peace, but at least quiet there, that some residents of the north basically will say enough is enough, and will start thinking about having to relocate? As for example, after October 7th, some residents of the south, the Gaza border area, obviously, also came to that decision.
That's absolutely true. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was sort of off in it, because part of that, the rest of that conversation that I had with my wife was, now that the Iranian ceasefire looks like it's not going well, and that things might re-escalate in Iran.
For sure.
We know our neighbors to the north. We know Hezbollah. And so my wife was saying, I may go back to school on Tuesday. I doubt, but we don't know she'll be going back on Wednesday or Thursday. Now, to answer what you were saying before, this is exactly why we're up in the north are very hesitant about the word ceasefire and what that means. Status quo is not good enough, and it's not good enough for us as residents of the northern border of Israel. And I think it's a disservice to the people in Lebanon. The one good thing that came out of the ceasefire, if I could say one good thing that came out of the ceasefire, was the peace negotiation discussions that took place last Tuesday. Now we have Lebanon and Israel at least unified in words in saying that the problem here on this border is not Lebanon and it's not Israel. We're dependent on Lebanon being a sovereign country, and what that's going to require. And they're saying it too. This is very good progress. They're saying too that it requires the dismantling of a terrorist organization, what I call a foreign occupier from the Iranian regime, and that's Hezbollah. Let us get the job done. We had promises of that before. It needs to happen. We took a great brunt of rockets, 6,000, 7,000 projectiles, whether that's rockets or anti-tank, or not the anti-tank, the hostile aircraft. We took the brunt of it. Let's get the job done. Let's not go back to status quo. Your previous guest said the region has changed. Let's finish it and let Lebanon join in that prosperity. You know, it's not just for us. There are good people north of us. I look forward to the day we have a peaceful border with those folks, and I can ride my motorcycle up to Beirut for some coffee, you know? And so, yes, they call it a ceasefire. It's supposed to be for 10 days. What do we have, 8 days left?
Right.
I'm not sure that that's going to last if Iran kicks off again. And so, like my wife said, I'm going to school on Tuesday. I don't know if I'll be going on Wednesday or Thursday.
Well, here's hoping she does, and here's hoping she'll have many more years of being able to go to school and all of you to live your lives as normal in North Lebanon. And also, as you said, those good people in Lebanon who also want to have their own independence from Hezbollah and Iran. Josiah Decano from the Northern Community of Natua, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
And here's a special message now from Haifa University.
The University of Haifa stands at the forefront of global impact, ranking #1 in Israel, and has been ranked among the top 100 universities worldwide for sustainability. Here, environmental responsibility, social justice, and academic research come together to build a better future.
U Haifa International also has adopted the sustainability perspective, where we take part also in high-impact work that is informed by academic research to ensure that we have a better world to live in.
From marine research in the Mediterranean to community-focused programs shaping peace and equality, students engage directly with the issues that matter.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience, and it opens your mind, your network, and your world.
Study where innovation meets purpose on a campus committed to progress, diversity, and global citizenship. Master your mind, live your Israel experience. Shape a sustainable future at U Haifa International.
Haifa is a beautiful place to go to school at. Thank you for joining us on this edition of ILTV. You can, of course, scan our QR code for our apps and continue to follow us on social media. Until then, I'm Caleb Ben David. Thank you all for watching, and please stay safe.
And joining us now with more on the ongoing U.S. naval blockade of Iran is retired Navy Admiral James Thogo Dean at the Center for Maritime Strategy. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be with ILTV today. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Operation Epic Fury has had some remarkable achievements, especially by the air, but no less by the U.S. Navy. We've seen the use of the Navy in this war in a way that, at least here in Israel, we haven't seen in a very long time. What can you tell us about the use of the Navy as a method of warfare in this operation?
Well, Epic Fury has clearly engaged a preponderance of U.S. naval forces, both deployed and those in reserve. And we have brought additional carrier strike groups into the theater, either the Red Sea, the eastern side of the Mediterranean, or down in the approaches to the Gulf. And that just goes to show the value of nuclear power and the ability to move 100,000-ton ships extremely quickly throughout the theater or swing from one theater to another. Additionally, we've got expeditionary strike groups, which is a Marine expeditionary unit, about 2,200 Marines on 3 sets of ships per expeditionary strike group, with additional aircraft, the F-35B and lots of capability, counter-drone capability, self-defense capability, and other helicopters and V-22s that can participate in amphibious landings if necessary. So there's a lot of Navy force out there, and I'm very happy to see that the Navy is leading this campaign and the Navy is leading this blockade. And quite frankly, I think the blockade was a brilliant stroke at this point, since Iran depends on the Strait of Hormuz to export about 90% of its oil, but not just that, goods and services going in and out of the country. So it puts the pressure on the Iranian government and the Iranian leadership to get back to the negotiating table.
That actually leads to my next question, which, President Trump has said that the Islamic regime in Iran has really extorted the world through the Strait of Hormuz, and now the U.S. has sort of turned the tables, blockading the Iranian ports while saying that it is ensuring freedom of navigation. So, you said this is a brilliant strategy. Can you perhaps expand on that a little bit and talk also about the impact of this on Iran?
Certainly. Well, first of all, the Strait of Hormuz is an international strait. So it is nobody's strait. Nobody owns it. Everybody has access to it under the UN Convention on Law of the Sea. So I find it outrageous that the government of Iran would try to control the strait and control traffic. Furthermore, somebody asked me the other day on a news program, well, what is a blockade? Technically speaking, a blockade is an act of war. It's something that the United States Navy has done throughout its history for hundreds of years. The blockade of the Barbary pirates in North Africa, for example, in the very beginnings of our Navy. The blockade of the South during the American Civil War, tragic as it may have been, but the Union Navy blockaded the southern ports and would not allow guns or butter, foodstuffs, supplies, uniforms to get in there. And it frankly was a cost-imposing strategy that broke the back of the Confederacy and ultimately ended the war. And so we know how to do these things. Iran made a calculated decision to try to restrict access, and also it's illegal to charge a $2 million toll and operate the strait like a toll booth for each of the ships going through there. Now, let me put that in perspective for you. So there's about 100 ships that pass through the strait on any given day. And at $2 million a pop for a toll, if you multiply that out by 100 ships and 365 days a year, if I did my math correctly, that's a take or a profit for Iran of $73 billion in 1 year. General Petraeus made a comment the other day that there's a fudge factor there, and with all the other goods and services, that number is really $90 billion in profit. So somewhere between 73, 75, and 90 billion going into the Iranian economy. That's more than the United States government allocated for the ship construction budget for the United States Navy in our $1 trillion defense budget. So that gives the Iranians the opportunity to rebuild and reconstitute those threats that we just spent the last month eliminating. So that would be air defense artillery, a Navy which rests on the bottom of Davy Jones' locker, as Americans will say, in the bottom of the sea, and other war materials that can be used against Israel, against our allies and partners, or against the United States itself. And the Iranians have proven that they have used missiles and other tools and mines now to restrict or attack the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. And I believe that was a big strategic mistake on their part, because now the GCC has no sympathy for Iran. Everybody is rallying to try to stop this war and to try to prevent Iran from reconstitution. So we can't allow them to charge a toll. We can't allow them to rearm and rebuild. We need to compel them to get back to the negotiating table, and that's what the blockade is all about.
So the U.S. Navy doing remarkable work. Admiral James Thogo, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Well, joining us now to help us break down this rapidly changing situation in the Middle East is the former National Security Council Senior Director under President George W. Bush and Managing Director at Beacon Global Strategies, Michael Aoun. Michael, thank you so much for joining the broadcast today. I want to ask you, at this point in the war, what is President Trump trying to accomplish? Because, as you know, many of his messages seem unclear to many or even contradictory at times.
Well, I think now he is trying to negate the leverage that Iran had by threatening to blow up commercial tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. This is exactly where we ought to be focused. This would have been really dangerous if we had somehow ended this conflict with Iran feeling like they could dictate to the world how many ships got through, that they were able to do a toll booth. And so that was the worst of all worlds. And he's moving now towards reopening the straits. More ships are getting through, not enough yet. But I think this has been his primary focus. And this, I think, eventually, by blockading the Iranian ports, may put the heat on them to want to come to the table and make more substantive concessions.
Now, we saw yesterday the Mossad chief David Barnea speaking about how the war in Iran isn't over until the Islamic Republic falls. Are we seeing a divergence between U.S. goals and Israeli objectives here, or is he speaking more long-term vision of the Middle East, do you think?
Well, I do think at some point there is a divergence. I think the United States would love to see the regime collapse. I think people have reluctantly made the conclusion that it's not something that's going to happen automatically. I think we hope that we'll look back on this campaign and once the regime collapses and say this was an important milestone. But, I think Trump is trying to move to a new situation where we have a completely degraded Iran. Their nuclear program has taken big hits. Obviously, their military has. The Strait is reopened, and Iran wants to do a deal. So, at some point we diverge, although we both have the same ultimate goal.
You know, the media has claimed that the Islamic Republic was offered a 20-year freeze on any uranium enrichment by the United States. Is that something you think could actually rein in the regime, or even 20 years is simply giving them a temporary survival lifeline to continue their work towards a weapon later on?
Yeah, I think it would give them a lifeline. 20 years is a long time, but still. And by the way, that sounds a lot like the Obama era JCPOA that tried to put time limits on things. And I think once the president focused on it when J.D. Vance came back, he rightfully yesterday sort of disavowed the 20 years and said he wasn't interested in it. That's not to say it couldn't be resuscitated. There are reports, of course, that we may have a second round of negotiations sometime soon. I expect the ceasefire to be extended. So the issue is probably not over yet, but, I'm not expecting it.
Now, is it possible to make a deal with this regime which actually meets all the demands of the United States?
Not as our demands exist today. We obviously want them to abandon support for terrorism. Their ballistic missile program should be severely cut back. We want them to turn over their highly enriched uranium. I'm still of the view that the maximum that Iran can give does not meet the minimum that the United States can accept. So I'm glad they're going to run a few plays. They're going to try to get some sort of arrangement. I think Trump will try to be creative, but at the end of the day, if pressed, I see a de facto indirect ceasefire persisting, but I don't see really a huge deal coming anytime soon.
All right. Well, we'll continue to follow that closely. I want to thank you for your time today, Michael Aoun.
Thank you.
World Jewish Congress leaders joined Holocaust survivors and international delegations in Poland for the 2026 March of the Living. Amid the annual commemoration at Auschwitz, World Jewish Congress Israel President Sylvan Adams delivered a stark warning on the global rise in anti-Semitism, drawing parallels between today's climate and the early warning signs that preceded the Holocaust. Let's have a look.
Thousands gathered at Auschwitz-Birkenau for the annual March of the Living, a powerful display of remembrance and unity led by Holocaust survivors and Jewish communities from around the world. Speaking on Holocaust Remembrance Day at Auschwitz, President of the World Jewish Congress Sylvan Adams warned that anti-Semitism is not only persisting, but evolving into a global and organized threat.
The main foreign forces are Iran, with their proxies spreading their tentacles all over the world. We have Qatar, that has invested, that has sent radicalized imams into the mosques to radicalize the Muslim population of the West. And also at the same time, the Qataris have spent hundreds of billions of dollars in education. Of course, we know about their activities in the universities, but now they're going even younger. They're going into high schools. So they're basically brainwashing the next generation. And then finally, we have the Chinese, and the Chinese are the owners and manipulators of TikTok, which is the most virulently anti-Semitic of the social media platforms. And at the same time, China is a superpower. It has a veto at the United Nations Security Council, and they are giving cover to Iran and Qatar, and essentially with completely different perspectives, they form an axis of evil. So unless we identify the enemy and the battlefield, so we have three enemies and the battlefields. The battlefields are the mosques, the education system, and social media. So we know now that we've identified the problem, now we have to have a plan to deal with it.
The World Jewish Congress, which represents Jewish communities in over 100 countries, is working to combat these trends by strengthening international cooperation, supporting security efforts, and advocating for Jewish communities worldwide.
I'm so proud to be at this year's March of the Living, representing the World Jewish Congress Israel, together with our president, Sylvan Adams, marching for those who perished, for those who survived, for our hostages who are back home, for our soldiers who are fighting, marching for the Jewish people, marching against anti-Semitism, and proclaiming to the world that we are here.
The March of the Living serves as both a memorial and a warning, reinforcing the need for vigilance, education, and global action as anti-Semitism continues to rise. Ending with a positive message in the torch-lighting ceremony, Adams said this:
"Those who feel afraid and intimidated, those who feel exposed, those who are told to hide who they are. And I say to them, you are not alone. We stand with you. We will speak, we will defend who we are with clarity, with strength, and with pride."
Diplomacy has collapsed. At 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday, the U.S. will impose a naval blockade on Iran, an extraordinary escalation in an already raging conflict. Will it break the regime in Tehran or reignite an all-out war no one can control? Welcome back, everybody, to the Quad. And here is President Trump making it very clear what's going to be happening today, Monday. Watch this.
At 10 o'clock tomorrow, we have a blockade going into effect. That'll be 10 o'clock tomorrow. Other nations are working so that Iran will not be able to sell oil, and that will be very effective.
So there you have it. And here to unpack all of this and more, my wonderful panel, Emily Schrader, who is a human rights activist and journalist, Shoshana Keats-Jaskell, the founder of Chokhmat Nashim, elevating Orthodox women voices, and backed by popular demand, our very own Ruthie Broom, senior editor here at JNS. And now we see what we were telling Trump. We knew, because we've spoken about it many, many times, that the Islamic regime is not interested in getting rid of their ballistic missiles, of their nuclear program, because, as Ruthie, you were saying earlier, if my grandmother had wheels, she'll be a bicycle. You cannot negotiate with people whose very raison d'etre, very reason for being, is the terrorist, genocidal nature of the Islamists in Tehran. And so we're in a situation now that a little breather was given to them. And I have to say that I still believe that this breather was a good strategic pause. And I'll say why, and then you can fight with me. So first of all, the markets shot up the minute that it was announced. And I think that Trump maybe wanted to give a little bit of an economic kind of relief. I think that showing the world who these people are, yet again, in other words, let's give negotiations a chance. We're reasonable people. And then the cherry on the cake, sending J.D. Vance, who we believe, or it is believed, that he's the anti-war guy, sending him to these genocidal terrorists to see if we can negotiate, coming back and going, no, these people are not interested. From the very first moment we got there, they said they will not give up on their nuclear program. And so for all those reasons, I think this break maybe was a good thing, but maybe you believe otherwise, Emily.
I mean, I think that there's plus and minuses to both. I'm not going to say definitively that it was good or bad. I think there are good and bad, no matter what he did. I think that right now we're going the right direction with blockading the Strait of Hormuz. I think that's like a genius move, actually.
I agree.
And I think we'll talk more about why. But in regards to the ceasefire, I also agree with you. I think it was a great strategy to put JD there because it gives legitimacy to the claim that the Islamic Republic isn't interested in making a deal or compromising on the core issues of this war in the first place, the highly enriched uranium, the what they call right to enrich uranium. All of these issues are things that perhaps some of the skeptics of Trump, even on the right, might not have believed had it come from the Rubio camp within the Trump administration. But when it's J.D. Vance himself saying, like, listen, guys, this is what the situation is, it has a bit of a different ring to it, and I think it bodes well for the future, which I think we're going to see ultimately a return to some kind of military conflict. But what that will look like right now, we don't yet know. But I do think that there are definitely some positives coming out from this.
I mean, like I said, I really think it was perhaps what was needed to take the pressure out of the tires. You know, that's how I feel.
I will say just one more thing about the negative side, and that is that I think it's very dangerous how President Trump was talking about how we've achieved regime change in the lead up to negotiations. Another thing that's happening in the midst of this ceasefire that the international community is ignoring is executions. They're ongoing. They're increasing. The first quarter of this year saw a record number of executions for this time. That means formal executions, not massacring people in the streets, which they also did.
یک جنگ تمام عیار با این همه خشونت و اختباسات رخ داده یا نداده. من به نظرم میاد که ما احکاممون جناب آقای خیلی باید زیادتر صادر بشه. هم در رابطه با مصادره اموال، هم در رابطه با صدور حکم اعدام، اینا رو واقعا تسریع بکنید. اونایی هم که میشه حکم داد، به قول فرما شما با هم اصلا نیاز نیست تشدید، بالاخره اجازه داده قانون که این کارو بکن. اونا رو حکم بدید، اونا رو اعلام بکنید.
You don't have to make such overbroad statements in order to have diplomatic talks. Like, you don't need to praise them as if the people who are running the country are really different, because Ghalibaf is not. I assure you, he is not different. Yeah, it's the same people. It's the same ideology. And so that's actually really demoralizing for the Iranian people who, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to move the needle on an actual new regime on the ground. So he doesn't need to say that. Sometimes it's not, you know, the best idea to post everything on Truth Social. But as I said, there are positives from this situation.
But that's why we love Trump. And ultimately, I think that what people don't seem to understand, that conflicts can have very different ways of looking. So you have the part which is the military attacks, but then it can go, so the conflict can continue into another phase. Let's listen to what the Iranian people actually think about this ceasefire that just ended.
When the ceasefire came through, I would say at least 80% of Iranian people, they've been very angry. They've been very disappointed because what we want is the war to continue and get rid of this cancerous regime. And when the ceasefire came, there was some disappointment. What the ceasefire tells us that the IRGC is already collapsing, and there is already a gap within their systems because they have been divided inside the country within the regimes for the groups that are wanting ceasefires and the group that anti-ceasefires. They have a strong belief in President Trump that he knows what he's doing, and he knows this regime is cancerous, and if you don't remove the cancer, it will come back.
Shoshana, why are people in the West not actually listening to the Iranians who are telling them we don't want the war to stop? All these stupid anti-war protests, also in Tel Aviv.
They don't care. They don't care. They don't care. They don't care about the Iranian people. They don't care about, they hate Trump. They hate Bibi. They hate the West. They hate themselves.
True.
They hate themselves. They hate what America stands for. They hate what Britain stands for. I mean, look at the people they've elected. And in smaller places, they don't care about the Iranian people. It's very, very simple. It's all about the way I see the world. It's about what I think, and whatever is against Israel, whatever is against Trump, I'm going to be for that thing. And so you can always predict what they're going to think as soon as you see who is for something, you'll know that they're going to be against it. They don't stand for anything.
Or if Israel is in some way supporting of something, then they have
100%.
to be against it. Ruthie, you're a seasoned journalist. This week we saw Thomas Friedman on a CNN interview basically saying, yes, the regime should fall. They're the worst thing in the world. But if that means we give Trump and Bibi the credit, then that's what is tearing me apart.
Yeah, I find myself, Michael, in a situation where I really want to see Iran defeated militarily, because this regime is a terrible regime for its people in the region, and nothing would improve the region more than the replacement of this regime with a regime in Iran that was focused on enabling its people to realize their full potential and integrating peacefully with other countries and stop occupying Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. So I'm all for that. The problem is I really don't want to see Bibi Netanyahu or Donald Trump politically strengthened by this war, because they are two awful human beings.
Well, it's not surprising in the least bit. I mean, anybody who's been paying attention to that vile creature for years and years in the New York Times.
Don't hold back.
It's not surprising. However, what upsets me is not that, okay, Tom Friedman, the New York Times, I wouldn't wrap fish in it. But what bothers me is that there are Israelis talking like that.
Yes.
And Israelis, it is true now, we are not suffering the way the Iranian people are. And I think we need to stress that again and again, because in all of this discussion about whether the war is continuing and the nukes and the ceasefire, somehow the mention of the Iranian people sort of slipped by the wayside, and I hope it's intentional, which we'll get to in a minute, that it's possible stuff is going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. I hope so. And so the idea that let's stop talking about them for a moment. But so I'm not surprised by the New York Times. I am maybe not surprised by the Israeli left, but I think it is really shocking that Israelis who know we're up close to jihadism, we also spent the last weeks in bomb shelters. We know what we're dealing with, and that any Israeli intellectual would dare to agree with that position. I just think it's immoral, shocking. I'm surprised that any editor would allow it to grace pages of an Israel-based newspaper.
Well, apart from Al Jazeera Haaretz, of course. They're there just for that.
Right.
But what's interesting is what's going to happen now with this whole Hormuz thing, because that's like another stage of the war. And the whole idea that the Islamic regime could hold the Strait of Hormuz hostage and hold us as a choking point. I read a really, really interesting opinion this morning by a guy called Avi Avidan on X, which talks about the fact that what the IRGC have done, and this is good news, hopefully for us and for the free world, is they've made the Straits of Hormuz something which is now going to be irrelevant. They've signed their own death warrant in the sense that the Saudis are looking for alternative routes. The UAE is already doing alternative routes through Fujairah. You have the US exporting oil, and what they're basically doing is they're replacing the strategic value of the Strait of Hormuz, which means that they're signing their own death warrant by using it as that choking point. Would you agree with Avi?
I mean, yeah, for the most part, I think that's a fair assessment of what's looking like, at least right now, what it looks like is going to happen. It's not theirs to control. It's not theirs to use as a tool to negotiate with or to blackmail the international economy with. It's gone on for far too long. I'm furious with Europe's response and their lack of spine with defending what is disproportionately in their interest, not in America's. Okay, America doesn't need the Strait of Hormuz. It's Europe who does, or other nations.
It's Europe and the East,
yes,
which is basically China, which is now finding their own alternative ways of getting oil. And maybe this is what the Saudis should do. At this point, the Saudis should be saying to China, if you start providing missiles or missile capability to Iran, that's the end of, we're breaking up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
This is something you see in monopolies a lot. You know, obviously in the work that I do, it's a religious monopoly. We have religious monopolies in Orthodoxy. And the minute that someone starts to choke the people start to find alternative means. They start bypassing. And so it is almost like a good thing.
Yes.
The worse that they get, the more people realize, wait a minute, they're in control of me. I don't have my own choices. And now we're going to build alternatives. And those alternatives are automatically, better and more flexible and more varied.
The Iranian regime, we have to not say the Iranians.
Absolutely.
People keep using that misnomer, saying, you know, the Iranians, this, the
I learned my lesson 2 years ago.
The regime. So the regime shot itself in the foot, thank God, in this respect. But also, I think it's important just to stress that it's not only the Strait of Hormuz, all the ports, any port of Iran that receives oil is being shut off. That's the naval blockade. It's not just we're shutting off the Strait of Hormuz. It is we are not allowing anything to get to Iran through its ports.
Well, I just want to add some notes from another analyst that I read this morning, Niad Maleki, who works with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, but he broke it down by the numbers. He was previously involved on the financial side. So it's very, very interesting data that he has. And maybe we can even include the link to this. But he estimates that what we're looking at with the blockade would be approximately $13 billion of loss to the Islamic Republic per month. In addition to that, and this is the part that I actually found the most interesting, which is that if some of these locations aren't used, if this blockade continues with the oil, they are actually going to shut down, because when those mature oils overflow, the bottom water rushes in, and he explains all about how it works. Basically, it could permanently destroy what he estimates to be 300,000 to 500,000 every day of production capacity, which is approximately up to 15 billion in revenue per year, gone forever. So, and that's estimated to happen after 13 days of this blockade. So the regime is in a really, really bad position, not just in terms of the temporary short term, but like in the long term. The longer this goes on, the more damage it's actually going to cause.
Well, I honestly do believe that now it's a question of if and not when, which is an incredible position to be in. After years that we've been fighting against their proxies, because their proxies have been attacking us. And I just think that people just have to be a little bit patient, have a little bit of a strong stomach, and say they're on death throes. This is what a dangerous wounded animal looks like. And we've got to just stay strong. And I'm actually pretty impressed with Trump. I know that, when I say things like that, I get a lot of love and I get a lot of hate. But I do believe the man is a good strategist, and he's not given enough credit for the fact that he knew this was going to happen. He tried. He did the ceasefire. He knew this was going to happen. Let's see what happens in the Strait of Hormuz. Let's talk a second about worst case scenario. Are we going to see ships bombing each other this afternoon?
It's entirely possible.
It's possible, but by the way, that you call that the worst case scenario, I wouldn't.
It's not.
What is?
I would call the worst case scenario the Trump administration agreeing to some crappy bullshit deal that means nothing, and fantasizing that actually they're going to give up their nukes. They finally agreed, so we'll unfreeze assets. That's the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is that a deal comes out, any deal,
at
comes out with those
4:30
people.
At 4:30.
Or at any time in these next 2 weeks. To have the ships, bombing each other, that may be the thing that we need to finally finish the job, because Trump will say that's enough, okay? If there are mines that explode, for example, and this happens a lot with the Trump administration and with Netanyahu, we say, it's not happening, and then it happens. I wouldn't be surprised if within these 2 weeks we see military action, whatever. But I don't think the worst case scenario is war. I think the worst case scenario is a false so-called peace that's not peace.
Yeah. You know, the smartest thing I ever heard written or said about Trump is that Trump supporters take him seriously, but not literally.
Right.
And
That's
Trump
right.
haters take him literally and not seriously.
Yeah, right.
And taking literally what he writes, something that I haven't done for ages because I know that you have to take him seriously. And that's
I think the big problem for people like me, you, us, like maybe not, but the average everyday Israeli, let me say, is that this is being played out on a very political and world level, and obviously people who can analyze it and sit back and say, don't take him seriously, don't. But at the same time, mothers are running with their children to bomb shelters. Nobody knows if there's school tomorrow. Like, this has really real life consequences to the individual at home, and it's not so easy to just have faith in Bibi and Trump, because frankly, to be honest, you know, I'm happy that it's Trump and Bibi fighting the regime in Iran, but they're not the people that I want running my domestic affairs because they suck at it. They really suck at it.
I disagree.
No, wait. Do not cut me off.
Sorry.
Don't cut me off. I didn't cut you off.
Sorry.
So I will just say that the individual Israeli is resilient, but also still fighting wars. Our soldiers are still in Lebanon. They're still in Gaza. Their fathers are not home. The mothers are carrying the burden. And the idea that we could just wait and see, we go to sleep one day and he says another thing in the morning, and like, it's cute, but I just feel like it's important that everybody understand that there's real people.
There's
being impacted by
no doubt
this.
that there's real people, but what are our choices?
No, I'm just putting it on the table because I think it should be on the
table. If you're going to have two people who need to be running this war, to be honest.
And I agree with that still. And I do agree with that.
Now you mentioned Lebanon. I want to make a little detour or tour to Lebanon, because we have something which could be absolutely historic happening tomorrow, Tuesday, which is that the ambassador of Israel to Washington and the ambassador of Lebanon to Washington are going to be meeting under the auspices of the American administration to see if there's a way that we could have peace with Lebanon.
Yeah.
Could this happen?
I mean, I think it's definitely possible that it could happen. I see no reason why not. The situation as it stands today is that Israel and Lebanon are on the same side against Hezbollah, which is occupying Lebanon, which really is the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yeah, talk about an illegal occupation.
Exactly. So we are on the same side. Our interests do align. Everybody wants to see Hezbollah disarmed except Hezbollah and the Islamic Republic. So that's the situation where we're at today. I think the opportunity is better than ever for some kind of agreement between Lebanon and Israel. I think if we do see that and we're able to work together to eradicate Hezbollah and disarm them, we're going to see a very new relationship between Israel and Lebanese. It's crazy, but we see more Lebanese than ever speaking out, in favor of that. But also, they're not looking to Israel as the problem here.
Well,
they're looking at Hezbollah. And it's funny because since those talks were announced, Hezbollah is trying to bully the Lebanese into canceling these talks, acting like they're the defenders of Lebanon when they've driven Lebanon into war for decades.
Absolutely. And, you know, and the biggest criticism that we've now received about what's going on in Lebanon, something we had to do because we were being attacked. They joined the war with Iran against the Islamic Republic. They shouldn't have gotten involved. They got involved, and this was our moment to get rid of essentially the Islamic regime on our northern border, because that's exactly what you are. But I find very curious that the same people who are saying stop the war are now saying no peace.
Yep.
Those same useful idiots who are saying stop the war with Iran are saying no to peace between Israel and Lebanon, which just tells you who they are. And the craziest thing of all is that we might have Syria and Lebanon, the government, whatever's left of it, and Israel fighting Hezbollah together at these prophetic times, Ruthie?
Well, I think the most stunning thing about Lebanon, because I'm very skeptical about it just because of what we've seen, okay? And by the way, and I apologize to Shoshana for cutting her off, but what was... No, but it's relevant
so civilized, we would never make fears more about it.
But it's relevant to what I want to say about this blind faith. No, of course, we cannot have blind faith in our leaders ever. I think, but if we base it on what they've done, even when we don't know what they're up to, and then we discover, then that's why I have developed faith in them. But and the same thing with where Lebanon is concerned. Hezbollah, apparently, Israel,
that's right,
just foiled a major coup in Lebanon. Hezbollah was about to stage a coup. Now, it's true, Hezbollah is basically running Lebanon, has been for a long time.
What would have been the difference, Ruthie, staging a coup from what happened right now?
Because I think it would have been worse, because then they would have totally taken over the entire government. They would have
the
kicked
Lebanese
out
forces.
The Lebanese forces. Now, it's true they were already in part of the Lebanese army and part of the government, et cetera, et cetera. But this would have been a massive takeover, and we foiled it in some way that I'm not sure what that was, but it was.
Well, we bombed 200 of the Hezbollah bases.
No, we did, but there was apparently it was close to like the beeper operation in its cleverness or something like that.
It
even surpassed it, and we don't know exactly what that was.
We'll find out.
But that in itself is great. Now, the reason I'm always skeptical is very often Israel will do something along those lines, and then we'll hear criticism. For example, I wouldn't be surprised to hear criticism of the Lebanese government saying, well, Israel just kills too many people. It was like, really? Are you kidding me? So I'm waiting to see. I want to see genuine cooperation. And yes, I think the talks are a good idea. Can't hurt. But let's just be careful.
What I know from the Lebanese people, and I've met many, and I have many friends who I've met in Dubai, actually, a lot of Lebanese people moved to Dubai, is that they're very similar to Israelis, that they do love life, that they want to live a good life, that they want to have families, and they want to party.
The difference is, it's a huge section of the country is Christian.
Yes.
It's a very, very different history and a different mentality than some of these
well, they used to be
Arab
majority.
states yes.
They used to be almost majority Christian until they were run out.
Didn't Syria just foil a Hezbollah plot to kill a rabbi in Syria, which I didn't even know there were rabbis in Syria?
I didn't know there were any Jews left in Syria.
I think there's like 5 or something.
Yeah.
But I think the Syrian forces or whatever, not regime forces, foiled the Hezbollah plot to kill a rabbi and to start in Syria.
And they're still butchering Druze and Christians. So they really need to cut them out.
Who do you have to like work with now?
Who do you have to work with?
It's crazy.
Who do you have to work with? That's a great question.
You know, all these actions of Israel in Lebanon, they've been criticized by a lot of even world leaders, especially with the discussion of ceasefire when Iran, the Islamic Republic, I should say, tried to insert ceasefire in Lebanon into the discussion when it never was. This is a complete psyop. But the reaction that you see from world leaders is utterly shameful, because even more than Gaza in a way, and I'll explain why, because the international community has already accepted with consensus that Hezbollah needs to be disarmed and they cannot operate or exist south of the Litani River. This is already established. It was voted on in the United Nations, not one, but 2 UN resolutions, 1701 and 1559, both state that. And yet still, even with billions of dollars from UNIFIL, U.S. taxpayer dollars, by the way, going to the UN, it hasn't happened. Hezbollah hasn't been disarmed. They've been allowed to rebuild on the southern border and launch thousands of missiles at Israeli civilians in residential areas. Nothing has been done. So the international community should be thanking Israel for doing their job for them. I think they should send Israel a check.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Let's disband UNIFIL, who are now apparently collaborating with Hezbollah, helping hide them. And they found a whole bunch of weapons caches under their bases. They are a waste of time, and they are really a fifth column in this peacemaking.
Same thing to do.
What a joke. And Emmanuel, I surrender before I begin, Macron, saying that, that the only way to deal with this is to negotiate a settlement with terrorists. You know what? Emmanuel Macron, I love Trump so much. Did you see what he said about him?
He is hilarious.
He said his abuse by his wife. Anyway, Emmanuel Macron saying that, yes, Hezbollah has to disarm. What you going to do about it, big man? What are you going to do about it? Nothing. That's what you're going to do about it. And that's how we have to do the job. But on that note, let's move on.
There's one more thing that's really important to say. One of the reasons that they were talking about Lebanon so much is because of that strike on April 8th, where Israel hit 100 sites at once using 160 munitions, a tremendous operation. Most of them were strict military targets. A few of them were dual-use targets, meaning the Hezbollah was using them within civilian populations. And I just want to say, because it's important, because a lot of people are repeating this incorrect information, hundreds of Lebanese have been killed. In fact, hundreds of civilians have been killed. Antonio Gutierrez, UN Secretary General, literally said hundreds of civilians have been killed. Right now, as it stands, 254 Lebanese have been killed. Those are the statistics from Lebanon's Ministry of Health, which doesn't break down how many are combatants or how many are civilians. And yet, all of the international community, including world leaders, are taking those figures as if they are 100% civilians, when we know for a fact that as of now, it's expected to rise. At least 180 of those 254 have been confirmed to be members of Hezbollah, which is 70% combatant.
Yes.
So yes, we don't want to see any Lebanese innocents killed. That's why we called for evacuations. That's why we gave notices to all those dual-use sites in accordance with the international law. But if we look at the statistics of this strike, there is no evidence to support the claim that hundreds of Lebanese were killed in these strikes. This is not a war crime. This is taking action against a terrorist group that is sabotaging the entire state of Lebanon and holding the Lebanese hostage.
No, but it's not just civilians, it's all children. You didn't hear?
Yes.
Everything. It's the children.
Everybody's
It's the children. They're all riding on the children. If you want and care about those children, you'd want the terrorists to stop running their lives, you hypocrites. Okay, let's go.
Just one quick thing.
We're bringing all the scumbags in at the same time.
One quick thing about Macron and about Lebanon.
One good thing?
We used to say, one bad thing. What we used to say, and we continue to say, that Beirut used to be the Paris of the Middle East.
Yes.
Well, Macron has helped turn Paris into the Beirut of Europe.
You're not wrong, Ruthie. You're not wrong. And unfortunately, Europe is literally signing their own death warrant.
That's right.
Okay, now, to go on to even more scumbags, our favorite segment, Scumbag of the Week. Okay, ladies.
We even needed to go to the next segment.
No,
we're like all in it.
We're deep in it. It was suggested once that the whole show should be scumbags, and the truth is, it almost is. Okay, Ruthie, let's start with you as our guest co-host this week.
Okay, my scumbag of the week and of, I would say, the millennium is Erdogan of Turkey. And this week he popped up again. He's always doing that, saying that not only that Israel commits genocide, Israel is bad, we have to arrest leaders and put Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders and throw them in jail for 5,000 years or whatever it is. But he said we might have to invade and use military force against Israel.
Oh, he's going to invade us.
Yes. He said, we're going to do that like we did in Libya. We're going to invade. Now, let's just put it this way.
Great now.
Yeah, perfect.
He did a great job.
And Erdogan, I have to say, for years, he's been my pet peeve. I used to say, as a columnist, he was low-hanging fruit because every week, practically, he was committing some crime. He speak of war crimes and all that, but and the flotillas and I really think it is time that Israel totally sever all diplomatic relations with Turkey. Enough is enough.
Is there any left, though, Ruthie?
Well, there officially, yes.
We don't have an ambassador there. They don't have an ambassador here.
Right, but we have not officially severed relations. Right. Where and then we go back and we had Obama make Prime Minister Netanyahu apologize to Erdogan and give him money reparations for the Mavi Marmara. But in any case, Turkey is an enemy of the state. He's an enemy of the West. He is an Iran supporter, basically. I mean, he houses Hamas. And the point is, the guy is on the wrong side of history, and he should be called out.
How do you interpret the fact that he was attacked by Iran?
Well, these bedfellows are always strange. They, switch sides.
They're competing desired empire.
He wants, that's right. He wants to be the next Ottoman Empire. So there's competition there. But when it comes to Israel, he's on the same page as Iran and all its proxies.
Yeah. Erdogan is definitely a worthy scumbag of the week. Thank you, Ruthie. Emily.
My scumbag of the week is Mahmoud Khalil, who should have been deported from the United States a long time ago because he really hates the United States. I don't know why he's fighting so hard to stay there.
You know why.
Yeah, exactly. This week, his appeal against his deportation was denied. Yes. Yes, the right move, finally bringing him one step closer to deportation from the United States. Now, for a reminder, Mahmoud Khalil was one of the leaders of the encampments at Columbia University, where he attended as a grad student, I believe. He was the spokesperson of CU, Columbia University Divest, the group working against Israel. He had passed out Hamas flyers during the encampments. He is on camera in events where they're burning American flags, chanting death to Israel, praising Hamas, etc. This is who Mahmoud Khalil is. Since he has had his green card revoked by the State Department, he has been on a victimhood tour around the United States, being supported by organizations like CARE and other Islamist fan groups in the United States, trying to fight his deportation from the U.S. He even filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration for, multi-million-dollar amount that is ongoing. And he can't be deported until at least they're at some stage of that lawsuit, which of course was intentional on their part. But he made a tweet just yesterday, I believe it was, complaining about how the justice system has been so wildly unfair to him, violating his rights, which I find highly ironic given that he's Syrian and Algerian. I don't see any complaints from him about the justice system in those countries and what his rights might look like in a similar situation in Syria or in Algeria. But I guess he's going to find out, because eventually he's going to end up in one of those two countries. So shalom, Mahmoud. You're my scumbag of the week.
Well, thank you for that, Emily, because we always love a scumbag with a happy ending. And hopefully when he gets kicked out of America, I'm going to be there for it with popcorn.
Oh, and notice in all his victimhood tour, where is that baby, the famous baby his wife had, where he was, saying that it's so poor me because my wife is pregnant and all that. I guess he doesn't care that much about his wife.
I don't know. I think we saw him and the wife. The wife American? No, I don't think.
She is American.
So, really? Well, she's going to have to go to Syria and get used to what it's like to be a woman there. Okay, Shoshana, who is your scumbag this week? All right, Shoshana, take a breath.
Scumbag is the UN Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, and don't get me started, and all of the people who are on, or all the countries, I suppose, who are on that committee in the UN, who nominated the Islamic regime of Iran, for the committee. These names are ridiculous, but they nominated Iran for the Committee for the Program and Coordination, which shapes UN policy. It shapes UN policy on human rights, women's rights, and terrorism prevention. So explain to me how the Iranian regime, basically what they're going to say is, make women cover their hair or kill them, no human rights, and promote terrorism. That's pretty much what's going to be their entire, right? Fine, okay, so you could say the UN has always been, it's been held by the by the Arab bloc, okay, but then why did Canada, France, Spain, Norway, the Netherlands, Australia, the UK, Switzerland, Austria, and Finland go along with this? You could say there's a few bad apples, but what about these people? What about these people who do not stand up and say, no, they are perpetrators of horrible human rights violations? And so, just so you know, also China, Cuba, Nicaragua, Sudan, and Saudi Arabia were also brought onto that committee as well. So you can expect great things from your tax dollars in the UN coming soon.
Oh my God, it's really beggars belief. Look, it doesn't really, because these are the spineless European countries who are being held hostage by their Islamic vote. And of course, Australia, that has already gone to the dark side. And they're just, again, it seems to be the theme of this week, is like, these people are signing their own death warrants with these things. It's
beyond my comprehension.
And the UN is ridiculous already at this point. Like,
they're signing their own death warrants, and they continue to condemn Israel for human rights violations. How many times have they said that we're the worst violators of women's rights in the Middle East?
Yes,
seriously?
Yeah.
It's true that Israel, like any country, maybe there's a lot that leaves a lot to be desired in terms of women's rights, but not compared to those countries.
Israel, the only place in the Middle East where an Arab woman can actually vote. Okay, my scumbag this week is somebody that was a minor disturbance to me, like a little fly in my peripheral vision. I didn't want him to be a scumbag because I didn't want him to be relevant enough to be a scumbag. But Zach Polanski, congratulations. You've gone from a fly in my peripheral vision to a fly in the middle of my vision, and now I'm angry. Zach Polanski is the head of the Green Party of the UK. He's also a Jew. His real name is actually not Zach Polanski. It's something else, and I can't even be bothered to look it up. And Zach Polanski, a few years back, used to be a hypnotist. And his biggest trick, well, he tried his hand at acting, didn't succeed. And then he became a hypnotist. And his biggest trick or shtick was the fact that whilst hypnotizing women, he would make them believe that their breasts were bigger than they were. I wish I was joking. This was Zach Polanski's trick. What? Fast forward a few years, and this is how things have gone in the world, that today he is the leader of the Green Party. Now, you would think by the name, the Green Party's main manifesto would be around green energy, clean energy, and saving the world's environment. But no, of course not. Because now Zach Polanski, the House Jew, has become the guy who is going for the fact that every single interview he does, he condemns Israel, he says that we're genocide, he says we're apartheid, just blows anything he can out of his mouth. And that's what he's dedicated his platform to. They just passed, or they tried to pass a vote saying that Zionism was racism. I'm not sure it passed or it didn't, but he was in front of that. So much so that his own family are disassociating themselves from him because his family are Zionists. His mother goes to the protest, and his mother said, if he gets elected, I'm leaving to Israel. That is how ridiculous the situation has gotten. It's sad.
That's an awkward
sad.
family.
It's sad. But the best thing about Zach Polanski is that he's Jewish, but he also claims he's gay. Now, if you look at this video, you would see that all of my self-respecting homosexual friends would say he's not one of us because he can't dress and he certainly can't dance. So what I want to say about Zach Polanski is you're a joke. And the fact that you are now the leader of a party that people are taking seriously is exactly why the situation has gotten so bad. Because you were a hypnotist 5 years ago. And now you're trying to hypnotize the whole country into thinking that they have bigger breasts. So, Zach Polanski, you are, and I'm really angry that you got this important that I had to make you the scumbag of the week. But you are my scumbag of the week.
Why would a gay guy make women think their boobs are bigger?
Well, I actually don't think he's gay.
Well, I realize.
Yeah. I think he is pretending to be gay so that he can neutralize the fact that he's Jewish and be in with the woke. Because I don't think any of my gay friends would say, this guy's one of us.
Strategies.
No, I don't think so. But anyway, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. No. I don't know.
Didn't they just, the Green Party, they just had like a huge scandal. One of their like internal chats was leaked and there was a ton of like vile anti-Semitic
shocking
nonsense going on.
And he's the leader of this party.
Yeah, makes sense.
So he is the typical...
He was next to me on Piers Morgan when I was there in the studio last time. Yeah.
What do you mean? You were debating him?
I wasn't debating him, but he was the interview before, so we were seated next to each other. And even in that interview, exactly what you said, it wasn't about that. It was about his political career. But he's talking about Israeli genocide. I'm like, dude, who are you? Like, you have nothing to do with this.
And also, go to a dentist, man. Really? Look, my husband's a great dentist. And I know it's Israel, which for you is a problem. But, if you need help, if that's what we can bargain here to get you to shut up. Anyway, so that's my scumbag of the week. Now, we have to cleanse our souls with good vibes because we always have to end up on a happy note. And the happy note is our heroes. And for every scumbag, there are many, many heroes. Shoshana, who's your hero this week?
My hero this week is very relevant for today. Tonight starts Israel's Holocaust Memorial Day. And as I've mentioned before, I am the grandchild of Holocaust survivors. Everyone who tells their story, everyone who continues to remember what happened to the Jewish people, both individually and as a nation, are heroes to me. My grandparents restarted their lives 3 times each after losing children and spouses, and 3 different countries, and they each spoke 5 or 6 languages because they had to keep learning. And the resilience of the Jewish people, the resilience of the nation of Israel, and the resilience of people who want to live can never, ever be broken.
Never.
So remember that the Jewish people have been through much, not just the Holocaust, and not only Ashkenazi Jews. Everywhere we ever were, we were persecuted. And thank God now we have our own country that we defend. My heroes are those who continue to defend and those who continue to tell the stories and never, ever forget where we came from.
Amen. And, you know, when you speak to any of these Holocaust survivors who are now well into their late 80s, they are tough as nails.
Yeah.
These are tough people that went through so much, and yet they rebuilt their lives. You know, they just moved forward, which is really the story of the Jewish people.
Story of the Jewish people.
Thank you, Shoshana. Thank you for bringing that up. Emily, who's your hero?
So my hero is not nearly as deep and meaningful as that, I think, but I'm going to go with the United Arab Emirates this week because I think that they have been very, very steadfast throughout this conflict. They've been very firm on what their position is. That's been explicitly stated in multiple languages in a way that most of the other countries that have been attacked by the Islamic Republic of Iran during this time have not. The UAE, it's important to note, received more drones and missiles than the state of Israel in the past, you know, what is it now, 45 or so
3 or 4
days.
times as much.
Yep, they were bombing civilian sites within Dubai, Abu Dhabi, throughout the UAE. They were bombing infrastructure, energy sites inside the UAE. Terrible, terrible crimes, war crimes actually, were committed against the UAE. And we've seen the UAE quite outspokenly speak out even against the negotiations, I believe, or at least the way it was framed initially, and calling for the White House, for Trump, to continue the fight against the Islamic Republic until the end, trying to find solutions to reduce their power and influence in the region, and holding European and Western leaders accountable for their failure and their cowardice in confronting the Islamic Republic of Iran, even when it concerns their own energy and impacts their own population, such as what we talked about with the Strait of Hormuz. So this has been really inspiring to see. And we see a new alignment of global powers with the UAE and some of the other Gulf states aligned with, along with Ukraine, the United States and Israel against other countries, even some from the West, who are aligning with dictatorships. And there's a real divide happening right now. And we see some of also Eastern Europe siding with Israel on those issues. But Western Europe, I mean, it's gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my hero of the week this week.
Very worthy hero. The UAE, you know, first of all, they were the first country to embrace the Abraham Accords.
Yes.
So they were the Nachshon. They were the brave people who took that initial fire. And they are very clear-headed about intolerance, much more. You know, the irony is that they are now not giving scholarship to their students to study in the UK because they're being radicalized in the UK.
Insane.
It's insane.
It's insane.
It's insane. They're wonderful. We all have friends from the UAE who stuck with us through these very difficult years, and say
It does sort of show you that evil and stupid are not mutually exclusive, because Iran has been bombarding the UAE and other Gulf states, and you would think that Iran would maybe be careful about that, to try to get them to turn against Israel, to get those states to turn against Israel, but instead they had more missiles fired at them than Israel did.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I think it was a miscalculation on the IRGCs, but I think they thought
that's what I'm
they
saying.
would, because they're not used to
They
it.
thought global pressure would force the United
So
States.
evil and stupid go together very often.
I
actually,
love your
don't you think?
expressions, Ruthie. Who's your hero this week?
Okay, my hero are the Iranian people. I think that in all of our talk, missiles and nuke talks and ceasefires They probably feel forgotten to some extent because a lot of there's not as much talk about them and about their ability to come out to the streets and change their regime. Well, we haven't forgotten you. I mean, I would say the Israelis have not forgotten you, other than a handful of Israelis who are against the war. I think we talk a lot about Israeli resilience. I'd like to talk about the Iranian people's resilience.
Yeah.
They were gunned down in the streets. Listen, when we go out to protest, I don't care what side you're on, nobody guns you down,
No.
okay?
Yeah.
And these are people who, it's true, we had missiles, but we had bomb shelters and we had warnings.
Yeah.
The Iranian people have been, not only have they been tortured and oppressed all of these decades, but recently been gunned down, and women have been murdered and raped just for having their hijab on wrong. Those people are so brave, and I would like just a message to them. We haven't forgotten you, and this whole war, it's true we have to get rid of the nukes, but we're rooting for you.
Yes.
That's what I would say.
We really are, and that will really change the region and the world. And to your point earlier, Emily, I think that because of what we're seeing in the West, this kind of feckless, spineless leadership, I think the future is Middle and East. I really do think that there's going to be an American realignment in terms of NATO's basically gone. There's going to be a new type of NATO with these countries, these moderate Sunni countries. That's how I see the
We
future.
also have India in the
And
mix
India,
there,
that, you know, and India's always kind of kept relationships with everyone. But I believe ultimately that the new realignment is going to change the future of the world, because this cannot continue. But they're very, very worthy heroes, and we've had them. We always mention the people of Iran because we feel for them, we speak to them. You know, Emily's in constant contact with them as well, and we know how brave they are. And let me just say, the Iranian diaspora are the only people standing with Israel, and the Jews are the only people standing with the Iranian diaspora. And that's something that we're not, that bond is now bond forever, you know?
Well, it was I would say, eternal bond before, from the time of Cyrus the Great. I mean, it really is a connection between these two peoples that are indigenous to this region. A lot of people don't realize in the conversation. And I echo every word that you said. We are paying attention. We do hear your voice. We do see what's going on here in Israel, and we will continue to do what we can to raise awareness about this issue.
Amen. Amen. And hopefully bring down those bastards. Okay. Now, my heroes this week, it's hits a bit close to home. Someone in my family was injured in Lebanon on Shabbat, and moderately injured, fighting Hezbollah terrorists. And, you know, it hit very close to home. And it just made me wake up and realize that we have real casualties of war every single day here. Our soldiers, you know, have bravely, our young men and women have bravely fought the war from October 7th and, of course, for decades before. But this generation has fought the war from October 7th. And sometimes we hear the statistics in the news, moderately injured and more seriously injured or lightly injured. And then it's off the news. But what you have are heroes who then take months and sometimes years to heal from the war, from the fight that they did to keep us safe here. And now that it's closer to home, I understand what moderate injuries are. And believe me, they're not moderate.
No.
And when you hear people say that it's a serious injury, that serious injury is pretty serious, and it's on the line of life and death many, many times. And light injuries is somebody losing a hand. That's a light injury. And so I want to talk about, and I want to make my heroes, all those injured soldiers, and not just physical injuries, but also mental injuries and trauma injuries that don't go away when the war finishes and don't go away when a ceasefire is called. And they're there with them and their families for a long, long time, and sometimes forever. And because we're a country of a conscription army, we all know people. We all are either related to people who have any one of these injuries or all of them. And so my heroes today and every single day, these are the people I pray for. Our soldiers, our brave soldiers, and the injured ones that come home. And I pray to God every single day that He heals them fast. And so my heroes are these soldiers and their families for actually bearing the consequence of defending our freedoms.
Amen.
Amen.
So I'm glad I
Power
got
in
through
this
that without
country,
crying.
but also the whole world. I mean, these 18, 19, 20-year-olds are on the front lines of Western civilization.
Yes.
There's so much talk today about, oh, well, should the U.S. be supporting Israel? We don't want to fight Israel's wars. It's not Israel's war. No. We are fighting America's wars.
Civilization.
Right.
It's
especially against
we're
Hezbollah.
civilization. And, to kind of circle it back to Holocaust Memorial Day, I said in an interview recently that it's almost like a beautiful but painful irony that we were the victims in the Second World War, and today we are the liberators of the world. And if you don't see it like that, it's because you're not paying attention.
100%.
So anyway, on that note, we continue to pray for our soldiers, all our soldiers around the world. We continue to pray for the Iranian people and for their liberation very soon. And we will see you next week. Thank you for watching.
As war continues across Israel, thousands of workers will receive only partial paychecks before Passover. 5,000 families are currently on the waiting list for a Passover food basket from Yad Ezra V'Shulamit, Israel's largest distributor of food baskets to the poor in Israel. Joining us now is Yad Ezra V'Shulamit resource manager Danny Gewirtz to give us the inside scoop on what's happening today. Danny, thank you for joining us. Right now, we're just a few days before Passover. I want to ask you, what are you witnessing in terms of how this war is impacting Israeli families?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Good to be here. When war surges, it doesn't just hit the front lines, it drains the lifeline of organizations like ours. I think what we're seeing here right now, Emily, is what I call the perfect storm. As you mentioned, it's right before Pesach, so the timing really couldn't be worse. We have a war, there's less funds available. Many organizations are fighting for that piece of pie that's out there to give to organizations like ours. The shekel dollar rate is killing us, as many of our donors have found out. People aren't working also. People, of course, are at home. They're home with their kids. Our fundraisers, who should be out in the States right now, have been basically grounded. The local telemarketers haven't been able to go to work. I should be out there going and talking to major donors. It's heartbreaking, really, what's going on, because we're struggling to even reach the 60,000 food baskets, which every year we're committed to giving. And as you mentioned, we have 5,000 families on a waiting list that don't know if they will even have the assistance that Yad Ezra V'Shulamit gives them, and that they depend on every single year.
Who's being hit hardest by this war that you've seen so far?
Well, it's hardworking families, families with lots of children, the elderly, Holocaust victims, anyone who depends really on Yad Ezra V'Shulamit for their basic needs, for that food basket that comes to them. And it's just been very, very tough. It's basically just people who depend on us for food.
Those who are really in need right now. I do want to ask you, I mean, given the unique circumstances, you spoke a bit about it, but how does the fundraising this year compare to previous years?
Well, as I mentioned, the fundraisers have basically been grounded, as you can't leave the country. The telemarketers are basically at work, so they haven't been hitting the phones. And it's really created a shortfall in our ability to meet that commitment of 60,000 food baskets. We have 5,000 people on a waiting list, and I'm imploring people, or challenging them, to take the food basket challenge, as the jargon goes here today, to go out there, and if everyone who's watching will take on a food basket or two, it'll really help narrow the gap of where we would like to be. So there's a saying in the Haggadah, I'm sure you're familiar with it, halach manya, let them come and eat. And that's a call for everyone to host people into their houses, to give people to eat. It's hard to do, obviously, but people can really actually do that before and go and donate a food basket and make sure that people who depend on us have what to eat. The holiday is so expensive. I'm sure you realize food prices have been soaring for years, but Passover always sees an increase in those food prices, and people can help if they just want to. They can go out and they can scan the code there, and they can actually give a food basket to a needy family in Israel, a poor, needy family. These are the vulnerable people who are really feeling the effects of the war. But the audience, your audience, can go out there and make a difference.
Absolutely. I think the need is perhaps greater than it has been for quite some time. The last 2 years in general has been difficult, but definitely right now a challenging time. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing and for joining us today, Danny.
Thank you very much.
Deep underground in Jerusalem, in fortified operating rooms, intensive care units, and maternity wards, doctors and nurses urgently treat patients, even while rockets are flying and sirens are blaring. Hadassah built these hospitals and is working to rapidly expand these underground facilities. Additional hospital beds and 6 advanced operating rooms are urgently needed. Please go to hadassah.org. Make a gift that helps Hadassah continue its long-standing, life-changing support of the Israeli people. Thank you.
The University of Haifa stands at the forefront of global impact, ranking #1 in Israel, and has been ranked among the top 100 universities worldwide for sustainability. Here, environmental responsibility, social justice, and academic research come together to build a better future.
Haifa International also has adopted the sustainability perspective, where we take part also in high-impact work that is informed by academic research to ensure that we have a better world to live in.
From marine research in the Mediterranean to community-focused programs shaping peace and equality, students engage directly with the issues that matter.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience, and it opens your mind, your network, and your world.
Study where innovation meets purpose on a campus committed to progress, diversity, and global citizenship. Master your mind, live your Israel experience. Shape a sustainable future at Haifa International.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kol El Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kol El Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help, and you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kol El Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now. ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV,
your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Caleb Ben David, coming to you live from Israel with all of the headline stories from here and across the region. And here are the latest developments. Despite the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah announced by President Trump on Thursday night, 2 IDF soldiers were killed this weekend and about a dozen wounded in 2 separate incidents in South Lebanon. The fallen were named as Reserve Sergeant First Class Lidor Parat, 31, who served in the Hiram Regional Brigade. Parat was killed and 9 others were wounded, including one seriously after being hit by an explosive device in South Lebanon on Saturday. In another incident, the Reserve's Warrant Officer Barak Kalfon, 48, from Adi, was killed while conducting a search of a building in the South Lebanese village of Jeban, when an explosive device there detonated. The blast killed Kalfon and wounded 3 other soldiers. May their memories be a blessing. But even with those incidents, the U.S. brokered 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah has largely been holding, with no rockets fired from Lebanon across the border since midnight Thursday. Lebanon's army accused Israel of breaking the ceasefire with limited shelling in several villages. There's been no immediate response from the IDF. Posting the announcement of the ceasefire, President Trump raised some eyebrows here in Israel when he announced that Israel is banned from targeting Lebanon. Trump wrote, "The U.S. will separately work with Lebanon and deal with the Hezbollah situation in an appropriate manner. Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the U.S. Enough is enough." Now, President Trump called the ceasefire a potentially historic moment and said he will, at an unspecified date, host Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Lebanese President Joseph Aoun at the White House for talks aimed at a permanent peace agreement.
With Lebanon, it's very exciting. I think we're going to have a deal. We're going to have a meeting, first time in 44 years, and Lebanon will be meeting with Israel, and they're probably going to do it at the White House.
And with ceasefires now holding with both Lebanon and Iran, the Home Front Command has eased all restrictions on sporting events and cultural events in Israel starting last night. The decision means full activity will resume nationwide, with the public returning to stadiums, performance venues, and events without wartime limitations. The announcement comes just days before Israel's Memorial and Independence Day commemorations coming this week on Tuesday and Wednesday. And on the Iran front, a second round of U.S.-Iran peace talks is expected to take place Monday in Islamabad. This according to Iranian sources cited by CNN. While Washington has not officially confirmed the meeting, President Trump has said Tehran has agreed to give up its highly enriched uranium and expressed confidence a deal can be reached in the coming days. While the 2-week ceasefire is due to end on April 22nd, which is also when Israel celebrates Independence Day. According to Trump, Iran has agreed to stop funding Hamas, Hezbollah, and hand over its uranium stockpile. A Pakistani media says back-channel talks have made progress with a memorandum of understanding possible soon and a comprehensive deal within 60 days. Trump says the talks are set and the deal is near. Iranian officials appear less certain.
We had to do something. We had to make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. And we're at that. They've agreed to that. They've totally agreed to that. They've agreed to almost everything. So maybe if they can get to the table, there's a difference. They agree. They got to get to the table with a pen. We'll have that over with.
Iranian officials dispute President Trump's claims, saying his tweets or statements are misleading and just inaccurate.
American side tweets a lot, talks a lot, sometimes confusing, sometimes contradictory. In the same statement, he said other things as well. So I don't want to judge what he means. It is up to American people should decide whether his statements are consistent and are in accordance with the international law or not.
And that's a wrap for this update here on ILTV News. Of course, stay with us on the hour, every hour, with the latest breaking developments and reports. I'm Khaled Ben David. Thank you for joining us.
I'm thinking about this widow whose husband was having dinner with her. It was her birthday, and he got a call. He was like a volunteer on the security team for the yishuv, and he got a call that there's terrorists and there's something going on. And he left dinner and he went out and never came back. It's not for me. It's for the thousands of families that we look after. It's theirs. It's really the country, the Minister of Education, the committee saying, "We see you." It felt like a gigantic hug for them.
Hello and welcome to the ILTV podcast. I'm Ayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV, and we are so happy to have back our viewers and our listeners. Now, today is a very special day. We're coming into Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, and we have the privilege of bringing on the show Chantal Belsberg. She is the founder and current executive vice chairman of One Family, and she is also the winner of the Lifetime Achievement Award of the Israel Prize. Welcome, Chantal.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Great. So, I want to get started just by asking you, when you heard that you were chosen for the Israel Prize, what went through your mind at that moment?
At that moment, I was thinking, it's not me. It's not for me. It's for the thousands of families that we look after. It's theirs. It's really the country, the Minister of Education, the committee saying, "We see you." It felt like a gigantic hug for them. Like they're going through so much and they're in so much pain, and the country stopped for a minute to say, "We're with you, and this is your moment."
And Chantal, how many families have you helped over the last, 26 years?
It's going to be 25 years in August. Okay. Thousands of families. I would say at least 7,000 families over the years.
Unbelievable. And it's so sad to think that there are 7,000 plus many, many more that need help in this country that have dealt with the trauma. For a second, just in case our viewers don't know, tell us what One Family does.
One Family looks after victims of terror and war. Basically tells them that they're not alone, that they're being seen, and that we're going to hold their hands and they're not going to have to go through this difficult time on their own. What we do is, over the years, it has developed in many layers that we've added over the years. It started with a lot of financial help, doing what the government couldn't do, because the government was always helping. Doing a lot of financial help, and with time we realized that we need to add a lot of emotional help. What we do is we do a lot of support groups. We build a community. So we build communities of bereaved parents, communities of widows, communities of children who lost parents, communities of children who lost siblings, communities of young adults who've lost siblings and parents, communities of children who've lost both parents, communities of wounded. The other important part of One Family does is that we have, in the beginning it was called a caseworker, but it's like a professional friend. In Hebrew, it's like your rakezet. Every family has their rakezet. So the rakezet is the person, it's not your therapist, but she can help you recommend a therapist. But it's a person you can call anytime, and it's a person who's there for you. It's a person people call when their house burns, and the rakezet will say, "Well, let's call the firemen." But it's their landline. So what's unique about One Family is the different layers that together create something that almost doesn't exist anywhere in the world. You can go to a therapist, but the therapist is not going to help you with your month, make sure that you have money to pay for food, because that's not what he does. So One Family will do also the therapy, also make sure that you're financially stable. So because if you're not financially in good shape, you're not going to be able to heal well. And also the communities so you have many, many different layers, and which together create that big support network.
Right, and that network is so important. And I know that, as you said, when you found out you were getting the Israel Prize, which I just want to make sure that our viewers know is really one of, if not the highest prize that someone can receive in the state of Israel. And you said you're dedicating the award to the families that you serve. So who are you thinking about right now?
I'm thinking about this widow whose husband was having dinner with her. It was her birthday, and he got a call. He was like a volunteer on the security team for the yishuv, and he got a call that there's terrorists and there's something going on. And he left dinner, and he went out and never came back. She never remarried, and her only son married somebody. I don't know that she doesn't get along with. I don't know, when I think of her, I just cry. I know she doesn't get along so well with her daughter-in-law, which happens. And anyway, so I'm thinking of her. I'm thinking of this young man whose entire family, was wiped out. I'm thinking of this young man. He wasn't on the kibbutz on October 7th, but his parents were killed, his brother, his dog. I'm thinking of this young boy who I met at One Family camp every year. He always came to sit next to me. My husband liked to be at the boys' camp, so it was just me and hundreds of boys. And so this little boy, he was little, but he grew over the years, and he always came to sit next to me. His father was killed, and he became... he grew up to be incredible, and he went into a fantastic, top army unit, and during the war he lost a leg. I'm thinking of all these siblings that are growing up without parents, and all these children that we've managed to, create a group with all the children who lost two parents, that we have been able to really be with them and do Chagim, holidays with them, and do Hanukkah with them, and Purim with them, and summer retreats, and Shabbat HaGadol before Pesach. And you see them, grow up and finish school and go to university and go into top units and go to medical school now, and you realize that there were little children when their parents were killed.
And now they're giving back to the country.
It's for them.
Amazing. Now take me back to 2001. I was living here also at the time, and I remember the Sparrow restaurant bombing, which I understand is really what inspired One Family. What did you see or feel with that attack that made you realize that this organization had to be built?
I tell you, it was a year into the Intifada, right? This was August 9, 2001. The Intifada had started in 2000, and we had moved to Israel in 92, so we'd already been in Israel like 8 years, and we saw a lot of people were being killed. But at Subao, it was the birthday of our second daughter. It was her bat mitzvah. So it felt like national, but also very personal. And we had planned she wanted a big party. We had planned a big party for her for the end of August when everybody was going to be around and family was supposed to come. And then they were all like, well, now it's in the center of town, in Jerusalem. I think we're not going to come. We're also in the States when it happened. We were visiting grandparents and family, like we were doing every year, taking the children to visit their grandparents. And everybody was like, no, we're not going to come. And we were like, okay, you know what, this is an opportunity. And really my husband, and I have to give all the credit, this is Mark and this is Michael. They decided this together, you know, let's skip, let's cancel, let's call 300 people and tell them that we're not having a party, and instead we're going to help the people from this attack.
Oh, wow.
So that's how it really started. I always said that I thought it was going to be a bat mitzvah project. If you ask Michal, she says, no, I knew it was going to be something big, or I wouldn't have given up my party.
Wow.
So she already saw something, you know, something bigger.
Well, so your daughter really kind of came up with the idea.
Yeah,
Your
she was
daughter
12 years
Yasmin.
old.
Amazing. So what was then the very first step? You know, when you raise money from the people who were planning to come to the party? How did you start out the project?
We got money together, a family that was going to come, and you know, instead, and money that we were going to. But we realized in the beginning we weren't really spending the money. What we were doing is visiting families and listening and being with them. It wasn't like we heard from the very beginning about like immense needs, but then there were more attacks, and we have to take care of these people, and and then was 9/11 also, like right after. And really that's how it continued. People weren't coming to Israel, right? And really the most important thing we were doing, everybody wanted to hear, we're with you. That's what we realized. We're with you. You're not alone. We see you. And like, you know, world Jewry is with you. That was really very much the beginning of One Family.
And is that what the families needed most back then? It was just somebody to sort of be by their side?
Say it again.
Was that mostly what the families needed back then, somebody to be by their side?
They needed to understand that they're not alone. People felt very alone. You have an attack here, an attack there. Everybody's dealing with, you know, their pain and their challenges and their difficulty of getting out of bed. But nobody was really connected to anybody else.
And there wasn't social media like today.
No, and you weren't connected. You didn't hear. You weren't. So this is really what One Family started doing. Made retreats, brought everybody together for Chanukah. We had like 1,000 people for Chanukah.
Oh, wow.
And bring the people together and make them experience nice things and happy things together, but really understanding this is for you, and there's people now who want to hold your hand.
So beautiful. Now, over more than 2 decades, tell me a little bit more about how the organization has evolved. You know, I mean, Israel itself has faced so many more, unfortunately, waves of terror since the Intifada. Obviously, each one a little bit different than the one before. I wouldn't call it culminating because we've had so much war since then, but the October 7th attack, of course. So how did One Family have to change in order to meet the growing and different needs of these different types of victims of terror?
So in the beginning, we were focusing very much on the parents and the widows. Within 2 years, we realized that within even a year, we realized that we have to look at the entire family as a whole, which is also like a little bit of the uniqueness of One Family, that we're not just there, not just for the parents, not just for the widows, that we look at the whole family. And then we started a youth division for the children, and then we realized after 18, okay, they're not children anymore, they're young adults, but they also have needs. So we started a division for the young adults, and then we started a division for the orphans of both parents, and then, you know, we also started a division for the injured, and so we just kept adding and adding, and after October 7th, we needed to, you know, add so much more because there was so much, the numbers were so big. And after October 7th, we added the support groups for the grandparents, for the parents of the widows, for the siblings who stayed alone, for the twins. We didn't have, there was maybe one twin who lost, you know, his other half for 22 years. And then there's 40 twins now.
Wow, 40 different twins that lost their other half on October 7th. 40 different twins that lost a twin. Also, I think 2 triplets. So we added a support groups for them. And, you know, a support group, a community, added groups for people who have more than one loss. There's parents who lost 2 children. There's
grandparents who lost, a few grandchildren. So they call it, in Hebrew, they call it shchol merube, like more losses. So we really did like a group of family members who lost more than one person. So that's what I'm saying. We'll just keep adding programs, keep adding different communities, and keep adding different types of support groups.
Now, I know when you talked about who this award is for, you mentioned a lot of different examples of people, but I'd love for you to share a story from, beginning to end that really touched you over, it's been more than 2 decades. I'm sure you have dozens of stories, but tell me one that really impacts the way you do your work.
I think of this young man who was on a bus that blew up, and he lost his vision and his hearing. We helped him so much over the years. He even got married. He married the young woman who took care of him in the hospital. She was doing alternative healing, and then they had children, and we even sent Shot Leumi girls to help them with the children. It's somebody where you could really see. You see, at the beginning, he couldn't communicate with his parents because he couldn't tell them. He couldn't talk. And then over time, communication got better. But it was heart-wrenching. We really felt like, we really, really could help there.
How old was he at the time of the bus bombing?
I think he was 18.
Oh, wow. Amazing. And today he's got children and living a productive life. Amazing to watch that kind of progression. Now, you've supported, as you mentioned, bereaved parents, widows, orphans, the wounded. There's this word that gets thrown around all the time nowadays, especially in Israel, resilience. What have all of these people taught you about that word? How do you define resilience today?
I think it's not strength necessarily. I think it's more courage. It's the ability to wake up in the morning with a lot of pain and managing to get out of bed, trying to make it through your day, even though this reality can't be fixed. It's being brave.
I love that. Resilience is bravery. We often talk about this idea also of national trauma, and it's sort of an abstract term, we're a nation of trauma. Israel is a nation of trauma. What does it actually look like, though, when we talk about being traumatized for a family, for an individual, and really for a community and a country? How would you break that down for us?
I would say, if you take parents, for example, who lost a child, they first of all, they go through it very differently.
Okay.
And they heal differently. And they need different things. Sometimes their relationship is not good.
The relationship between the parents.
Between the parents. And then they become estranged. And then you have children who will say, when I lost my brother, I also lost my parents. Because the parents sometimes, and this is what we keep saying, sometimes they forget that they have other children. So they focus on this child, and they put up a shrine, and a gigantic picture of him in the living room, and he sort of becomes almost like the only child they had, and that God took, and he's gone, and their life's over, and they give up their job, they don't go to work, do you know what I'm saying? Everything falls apart. And then the other children lose not only a sibling, but also their parents. So you have to work on all of that. You have to work on their relationship, make sure that their relationship is good. You have to work on reminding them that they have other children, and do everything you can so that the family doesn't fall apart, and you lose more. You lose even more people. A widow, for example, her husband used to do everything, and now she needs to take care of everything he used to do and everything she used to do. It's a lot. So we have Shot Lomi National Service volunteers who come and help and, give her a little bit of a break and, an extra set of hands, really.
Yeah.
Is, what she needs. How is that? Children who lost both parents, it's like everything is falling apart, right? They lost their home, their anchor, their solid ground. How did one woman said? She said that take a balloon. It's like every balloon's attached to a string. So she says, so we are like the balloon that's floating and that doesn't have the string attached. Oh. Right? That's just to make you a little bit understand what it means when, you grow up and you go through life. And it's not just one moment. It's for every moment. It's at every simcha. It's at every milestone. It's every chag. They notice all the grandmothers who are picking up the children in Gan. I try to tell them I'm not picking up my grandchildren in Gan. But they only see the grandmothers who are there.
Right.
So...
And what about the long-term impacts on the community then, and Israel? Because obviously, as you mentioned, you've already touched at least 7,000, if not more, families, and those obviously have many, many parts to those families. So we're talking about tens of thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands of people, whose lives have been touched by terror and trauma over 20 some odd years and more. What does that do to Israel? How does it impact us as a people?
And I think it's going to take many, many, many years to overcome. I think that we still haven't understood what it really means and how much commitment and patience and resources we're going to need. It's not just something for a few months. It's something that's going to take many, many, many years. And it's not just the bereaved and it's not just the injured. It's the family of the reservists, it's the people who've had to move, it's, relocated, it's many, many, many layers.
Many concentric circles they talk about.
Many circles.
And Chantal, even you, as you're telling these stories, you can see the tears in your eyes. You're making me want to cry, which I'm trying not to do. But I have to ask you, how do you deal with all of this grief day in and day out for over 20 years? How do you carry it personally and get through your own day?
I think I only start tearing when I have to start talking about it. But in front of the people, I have to, I try to be strong. The families give me strength. It's to see them. Being brave and being so courageous and so honest and so trying so hard to. It's like there's a word you can't use. Some people don't like the word overcome. It's not something that you can so easily overcome. It's like you continue, you continue, you build and you love and you continue with life, but alongside the pain. It's like the pain doesn't go away. The pain is there, but you have to try to be resilient and courageous and alongside the pain. The families give me strength. I think that's where I get my strength from. It definitely has changed me tremendously, seeing so much pain. Definitely, you can't be indifferent to it, and it really, really changes you. But also knowing that you can help and that you could do something meaningful is also very helpful. Everybody is looking for meaning. I think I was very lucky that I could wake up every morning and know that I'm doing something meaningful.
Yeah. Incredible. And you've been described as I read many places, a steady anchor, a steady anchor, though, for thousands and thousands of people. So, who or what in the end anchors you? What does choosing life mean to you in the context of so much loss?
Well, one family has been an anchor, and one family is lots of incredible, courageous, and dedicated staff. I cannot take credit for doing all of this, but it's lots of people.
Work with your husband, and maybe just for a minute talk about that as well.
My husband's been amazing. He's been this award's really for him.
Well, for both of you. Maybe.
He hasn't become an Israeli citizen yet, so I say that I can receive the award for him. No,
Wait, you've been living here since 1992 and he's not an Israeli citizen?
No.
Oh, that's crazy. We won't get into the details of this.
He's a Canadian citizen, and he's very happy to be a Canadian citizen.
And you can't have both.
We've lived here 34 years.
Okay. That's crazy.
And I keep saying, you have to make Aliyah, you have to make Aliyah. But he's very happy the way, he's very happy with his status.
Yeah.
So I got the award. I told him he missed out.
Oh, well, you see, now maybe he'll make Aliyah. Now he knows he could have gotten this Israel prize. Amazing.
So he's really doing all the major fundraising.
Okay. Because you work you both are like co-founders, right?
Right.
With, I guess,
we're both co-founders. I was like the CEO for 20 years, so I dealt with all the little details that he didn't want to be busy with. So he has the privilege of, he can be here a little bit and fade out and come and go. But I, for me, it was steady. It was a steady job from the minute you wake up till you go to sleep. It's very...
For now, it's like you said, in 20, what is it on 20, what did you, how many
it's
years?
Going
20,
to be, right, it's going
5
to, one
years.
family now, it's going to be 25 years.
25 years of it. Let's look
My
at,
father-in-law was always upset that I wasn't taking a salary. He said that people who work should get paid. And I just never wanted to do that. To me, it was like we were fundraising. I'm not fundraising to pay myself.
So how did you live? It's amazing. Crazy. It's an amazing story. Amazing. You definitely deserve the Israel Prize. I want to look ahead for a minute because we're going to run out of time soon. Tell me what you think that Israel still doesn't fully understand about trauma and long-term recovery. What are the lessons from these 25 years that you feel that Israel still needs to absorb?
It's like what I told you before. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time, and we need to be patient, and we need to understand that there's a lot of work and that we have to do it slowly, patiently, and, one by one, and not leave anybody behind. That's really very much what we need to do. Just make sure we see everyone. Just make sure nobody gets forgotten. I think that's very much part of what One Family wants to do is like, you hear many stories of people before One Family, how their life fell apart, how they lost everything, how they never continue with life, and that's really, really what we don't want. We really want to make sure that you see young widows remarrying. I think they're setting a trend. They're pushing. I think we haven't understood, but we're getting there. People understand that there's a lot of work to do.
But also, if you do the work, as you're saying, that people can still have life alongside the terror.
I'm not
and
saying that
trauma.
everything is rosy once you remarry.
Of course.
Just heard about a widow who she spent Pesach with her children. He spent Pesach with his children.
Right.
It's not, you know what I'm saying? It's not the most ideal situation like you would have. But at least they're not alone, and they have somebody, they have somebody at their side.
Yeah. Now, if you could sit down with every family affected by terror and war in Israel today, as a last message, what would you want them to hear from you?
I'd like them to know that they're not alone, that we're here with them, that we're not going away, and that we will walk with them at their pace for as long as they need us. Because we understand, at this point, we really, really understand what they need, and we want to do that for them.
Amazing. And that is certainly what you're getting recognized for. Chantal Belsberg, the co-founder and the executive vice president of the One Family Fund, and also the recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award of the Israel Prize, which you will receive in the coming week. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
The United States has now imposed what it describes as a maritime blockade on Iranian shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, announced after the collapse of high-level negotiations in Islamabad over the weekend. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is fully backing the move, and the Islamic Republic is vowing to resist. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
The U.S. military says the measures now in place include restricting vessels entering or leaving Iranian ports while allowing international transit through the strait under strict monitoring. Iran has rejected the move and promised retaliation. A Revolutionary Guard spokesman warned that new methods of warfare could be introduced, while an Iranian military official said no port in the Persian Gulf or the Sea of Oman would be safe if Iranian shipping is targeted. President Donald Trump said the move is aimed at cutting off Iran's oil export revenues and increasing pressure on Tehran to accept American conditions for ending the conflict. Overnight, President Trump confirmed that the blockade was now in effect.
Has the blockade started, sir?
Yeah, started 10 o'clock. We can't let a country blackmail or extort the world, because that's what they're doing. They're really blackmailing the world. We're not going to let that happen.
Trump was emphatic about the nuclear issue.
Iran, you marking it down? Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. And we agreed to a lot of things, but they didn't agree to that. And I think they will agree to it. I'm almost sure of it. In fact, I am sure of it. If they don't agree, there's no deal. There'll never be a deal. Iran will not have a nuclear weapon, and we're going to get the dust back. We'll get it back either. We'll get it back from them or we'll take it.
Prime Minister Netanyahu gave his full backing for the U.S. blockade and for the strong U.S. position for the removal of all nuclear material from Iran. Pakistan is proposing that it host a second round of talks between the United States and Iran in the coming days, ahead of the expiration of the current ceasefire. Officials in Washington have said that while the first round of talks ended without an agreement, they were part of an ongoing diplomatic process rather than a one-time effort. The push for further talks comes as mediators seek to prevent a resumption of hostilities once the two-week truce expires.
Well, joining us now to help us break down this rapidly changing situation in the Middle East is the former National Security Council Senior Director under President George W. Bush and Managing Director at Beacon Global Strategies, Michael Aoun. Michael, thank you so much for joining the broadcast today. I want to ask you, at this point in the war, what is President Trump trying to accomplish? Because, as you know, many of his messages seem unclear to many or even contradictory at times.
Well, I think now he is trying to negate the leverage that Iran had by threatening to blow up commercial tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. This is exactly where we ought to be focused. This would have been really dangerous if we had somehow ended this conflict with Iran feeling like they could dictate to the world how many ships got through, that they were able to do a toll booth. And so that was the worst of all worlds. And he's moving now towards reopening the straits. More ships are getting through, not enough yet. But I think this has been his primary focus. And this, I think, eventually, by blockading the Iranian ports, may put the heat on them to want to come to the table and make more substantive concessions.
Now, we saw yesterday the Mossad chief David Barnea speaking about how the war in Iran isn't over until the Islamic Republic falls. Are we seeing a divergence between U.S. goals and Israeli objectives here, or is he speaking more long-term vision of the Middle East, do you think?
Well, I do think at some point there is a divergence. I think the United States would love to see the regime collapse. I think people have reluctantly made the conclusion that it's not something that's going to happen automatically. I think we hope that we'll look back on this campaign and once the regime collapses and say this was an important milestone. But, I think Trump is trying to move to a new situation where we have a completely degraded Iran. Their nuclear program has taken big hits. Obviously, their military has. The strait is reopened. and Iran wants to do a deal. So yeah, at some point we diverge, although we both have the same ultimate goal.
You know, the media has claimed that the Islamic Republic was offered a 20-year freeze on any uranium enrichment by the United States. Is that something you think could actually rein in the regime, or even 20 years is simply giving them a temporary survival lifeline to continue their work towards a weapon later on?
Yeah, I think it would give them a lifeline. 20 years is a long time, but still. And by the way, that sounds a lot like the Obama-era JCPOA that tried to put time limits on things. And I think once the president focused on it when J.D. Vance came back, he rightfully yesterday sort of disavowed the 20 years and said he wasn't interested in it. That's not to say it couldn't be resuscitated. There are reports, of course, that we may have a second round of negotiations sometime soon. I expect the ceasefire to be extended. So the issue is probably not over yet, but, you know, I'm not expecting it.
Now, is it possible to make a deal with this regime which actually meets all the demands of the United States?
Not as our demands exist today. We obviously want them to abandon support for terrorism. But, you know, their ballistic missile program should be severely cut back. We want them to turn over their highly enriched uranium. I'm still of the view that the maximum that Iran can give does not meet the minimum that the United States can accept. So I'm glad they're going to run a few plays. They're going to try to get some sort of arrangement. I think Trump will try to be creative, but at the end of the day, if pressed, I see a de facto indirect ceasefire persisting, but I don't see really a huge deal coming anytime soon.
All right, well, we'll continue to follow that closely. I want to thank you for your time today, Michael Aoun.
Thank you.
The historic talks between Israel and Lebanon have taken place in Washington, marking the first open diplomatic meeting between the two countries in more than 4 decades. After the meeting, the Israeli negotiator, Ambassador Yechiel Leiter, called the U.S.-mediated talks a first step towards normal relations between two neighbors. More from ILTV's Caleb Ben-David.
The meeting, held at the U.S. State Department, brought together Israel's ambassador to the United States, Yechiel Leiter, and Lebanon's ambassador, Nada Hamadeh Moawad, alongside senior American officials. The talks come amid continued fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, with rocket and drone attacks still occurring along the northern border. Israel says operations will continue despite diplomatic efforts as it seeks to degrade Hezbollah's capabilities. Hezbollah has rejected the talks, with its leaders warning the group is prepared for further escalation and to defy demands that it disarm. Israel has been pursuing a dual strategy, continuing military pressure while testing diplomatic options, though skepticism remains over Lebanon's ability to disarm Hezbollah. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the aim is to lay the groundwork for a lasting peace, allowing both Israelis and Lebanese to live in security and prosperity.
All of the complexities of this matter are not going to be resolved in the next 6 hours, but we can begin to move forward to create the framework where something can happen, something very positive, something very permanent, so that the people of Lebanon can have the kind of future they deserve, and so that the people of Israel can live without fear of being struck by rocket attacks from a terrorist proxy of Iran.
Israel's ambassador to Washington, Yechiel Leiter, said the talks focused on a long-term vision, including a clearly defined border and normalized relations between the two countries.
We talked about a number of things, and most importantly, the vision, the long-term vision, where there'll be a clearly delineated border between our countries, and where the only reason we'll need to cross each other's territory will be in business suits to conduct business or in bathing suits to go on vacation.
The Israeli negotiator praised what he called the brave decision of Lebanese President Aoun to have his government attend the talks.
The government of Joseph Aoun bravely said no to Hezbollah, and this is the beginning of a very strong and fortified, consistent battle against Hezbollah. They are weakened as they've never been, and together we'll continue to rid the threat of this Iranian proxy, which is so malign and so malignant in the region.
And now joining us to discuss the current situation with the ceasefire is retired U.S. Brigadier General Robert Spalding, the former senior director of the National Security Council and the current CEO of Semper AI. Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. Pleasure to have you on. To start, what do you think of this recent move by President Trump to blockade the Strait of Hormuz? What's the strategy here, and can it work?
Well, if you put it in the context of what happened in Venezuela, they're slowly creating a stranglehold over the economics that have allowed the financing of terror to go on in the Middle East and around the world for so long. And so I think this is part of a broader strategy. At the center of it, and although Iran is currently in the crosshairs, is China, and China is really supporting a lot of the things that Iran was doing, and of course supporting Russia and Ukraine. So it's part of a larger strategy that continues.
Well, we also see now that the U.S. is claiming they will return to talks at the end of this week. Does that mean that the position of the Islamic Republic has changed, given how we saw the last wave of talks, fade?
You know, this takes time. Of course, the Islamic Republic will have to feel the pain before they decide to negotiate. Every negotiation requires leverage if you want to get what you're looking for. It doesn't have to come militarily. It can come economically, and that's really where the closing of the strait comes into play.
What is the impact economically of this closure of the strait? I see a lot of people asking, well, if it was so bad that the Islamic Republic blocked it, why then would President Trump implement a naval blockade? Can you explain a little bit about that for our viewers?
Sure. They were blocking it, but they were also charging a toll for ships that were passing through. And so I think what the president said, if the ships are paying a toll, then we're going to block those ships. And any ships going into or out of Iran, we're going to block. So essentially what the president said is, no, you can't use the Strait of Hormuz as a way to make money. You can't either charge tolls or use it to sell your oil to China. So essentially it's an economic blockade that's being enforced by the U.S. Navy.
Now, I want to ask you a bit of a hypothetical question, but if a deal of some kind is struck between the United States and the Islamic Republic, what does that mean for terror proxy funding? Because obviously one of the demands we see from the regime is sanction relief. Would some of that funding not also increase the funding for terror proxies in the region?
Well, I think the Trump administration is wide-eyed about what Iran or the Iranian regime intends to do with the money. And so I think there would probably be conditions placed on any releasing of funds that go into Iran. You know, this, I think what happened before, certainly during the Biden administration and prior administrations, is just an inability to deal with Iran, the regime as it is. You know, we made up things in order to justify what we were doing. That is not the case with the current administration. So I don't really see the Iranian regime having much of a leash to go out and do the things that we're doing prior to the bombings that have occurred in the country.
Well, I certainly hope not, both for the sake of Israel and all of its neighbors, as we've seen in the past couple of months. I do want to ask you, though, President Trump has spoken of an international coalition to enforce this blockade. What do we know about that? How is the international community responding to Trump's recent moves?
Well, I think you're going to see like UK and France opt out, but I think there's other allies coming to the front. And it really demonstrates how, you know, after 30 plus years after the Cold War, how the alliances with the United States are shaping up in terms of who's really part of the free world and who is essentially standing on the sidelines. And for those that are standing on the sidelines, I think increasingly they're going to be left behind in not just our military relationships, but also our economic and financial relationships as well.
Now, we're seeing direct talks between Israel and Lebanon for the first time this week. What is the potential of these talks, and how likely do you think it is that some kind of agreement is reached between the Lebanese government, which is still going to have to contend with Hezbollah, and Israel?
You know, I think if you look at what the United States has been doing, you know, there is definitely a new sheriff in town. And so this is having impact across the world. And I think it impacts the relationship between Israel and Lebanon. We're just not going to stand for what we've stood for the past, 30 years. And I think the change is evident everywhere. We're seeing changes certainly in our hemisphere, but around the world, you're going to see increasingly things that have been going wrong or bad actors that have been getting away with it are going to be dealt with. And I think, Israel and Lebanon is a good example of that. Without the support of Iran for Hezbollah, Lebanon is going to have to become, forced to come and negotiate with Israel.
All right. Well, hopefully we can see a resolution to that with as little violence as possible, both for the Lebanese and for the state of Israel. And, of course, justice for the American lives that have been taken by that terror group, Hezbollah, which many people seem to forget about. I want to thank you for your time today, Robert Spalding.
Thank you.
As the war in Lebanon continues against Hezbollah, the international community is increasingly critical of Israel over civilian casualties, even while the Lebanese public is painting a different picture, exposing how the terror group uses the civilian population as human shields. ILTV's Emily Schrader investigated the recent strikes in which an anti-Hezbollah Christian activist was tragically killed, and the surprising information revealed by Lebanese locals after the fact. Take a look.
Israel has been at war on multiple fronts for more than 2 years. One of the most active is that against Hezbollah, a terror organization, a proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And with those growing strikes in Lebanon has also been an increasing criticism and accusations that Israel is targeting civilians. But an ILTV investigation into a recent incident in Lebanon tells a very different story. On Easter Sunday in the town of Ain al-Sada, an Israeli strike hit a residential building, killing Pierre Muawad, a Christian anti-Hezbollah figure, along with his wife. Almost immediately, the narrative took hold. Lebanese civilians targeted. But according to Arab-Israeli journalist Youssef Haddad, who investigated the incident, what happened inside that building tells a very different story.
Pierre was never the target. And in fact, the IDF targeted the IRGC Quds force, who actually was there. And unfortunately, due to the fact that this building was very old, and due to that strike on that target, Pierre got hurt as well, and his family.
Already, his death is being used as proof that Israel targets civilians. But here's where the story gets interesting.
At the time of the attack, the people of the village, and even the daughter of Pierre himself, saw a suspect fleeing the scene on a motorcycle, and even spoke to the daughter and told her, rush to the building, there are dead people there. The daughter of Pierre herself demanding from the Lebanese government to do a full investigation to understand who that person is.
من يومين حسب أقوال أحد أصدقاء الوالد الله يرحمه صار في مشادة كلامية بين بيي والصاحب الشقة يلي عم ينكر حضرته بيقول إنه الشقة فاضية. فرضاً فاضي لا ما يقول ما في حدا بالشقة. أولاً أخته ساكنة بالشقة وصار لها زمان كتير وبشكل دايم. شغلة تانية قال له في حدا غريب بالبناية أنا ما عرفت للأسف يا ريت عرفت. قال له هيدا ابن عمي والدليل على كلامي على السوشيال ميديا من قال إنه في ساكن بيت عبد الله إبراهيم وبنكتشف اسمه محمد شي.
The IRGC target did manage to escape the attack, but unlike the other voices that we're hearing, the local community isn't blaming Israel.
They were absolutely a legitimate target of IRGC, Hezbollah proxy in that building. He spoke to the owner of that apartment himself and said to him, listen, I'm hearing people in that apartment. The owner of the apartment told him, oh, no, don't worry. There are my people. There are my relatives, which is a total lie. There's a video showing that the apartment had water and even guns, which means that apartment was in use. The recording of Pierre saying in his own words, if something happens to me, I blame you, I blame Hezbollah.
بس أنا في حال صار شيء محملك مسؤولية كاملة. قالوا بلكي صار شيء ما بعرف قلت له لكن أنت مش مطمن. نقي قرر إذا مطمن بتطمني أنا عم بتطمن على حجتك أنت. إذا في حال شيء صار لا سمح الله بدي منك تتخيل وين ممكن يروح خيالك شو يعني تتحمل مسؤولية كاملة، لأنه الصاروخ اللي بيمرق هونيك بيقتل عنا. بقى يا مطمن اتركهم، إذا مش مطمن قيمون. بقى المسؤولية كاملة عليك حطها براسك.
Lebanese army intelligence also confirmed the presence of a suspicious individual at the scene.
حالة عين سعادة صاحب الشقة كذاب ورئيس البلدية كذاب. الأكيد إنه كان في شخص هونيك، الأكيد إنه كان له بين 48 و 72 ساعة مستأجر الشقة. اليوم مخابرات الجيش عم تعقب الموضوع وصار عندها معطيات حول الموضوع، معطيات كافية ووافية بحسب معلومات المتواضعة. صار عنده المعطيات إنه صار في عملية تأجير غير رسمية، وبالتالي الشغل عم بصير على هذا الأساس. الكاميرات موجودة، صور الشخص يلي فر من هونيك موجودة. ساء بحظه إنه كان يعني يا قبل ما يفوت على الشقة يا أول ما ظهر صارت عملية الاستهداف، وبالتالي هيدي مش روايات، هيدي وقائع صارت موجودة لدى الأجهزة الأمنية.
If we have all this information about the strike, we know who the target was, we know what the situation was, and eyewitnesses are saying it wasn't Israel's fault. Why do we see so much of the international media still blaming Israel in this attack?
The international media is already biased, and we've seen this not just now, also during the 7th of October, how they framed everything, and the Gaza war with the fake genocide and ethnic cleansing and the famine, and it goes on and on and on. Now, people who know Lebanon knows how Lebanon is divided to 4 main communities. 3 of those main communities absolutely against Hezbollah. Lebanese are filming Hezbollah points where they are hiding and using rockets and launchers, and they say, if I am dead, it's because of them, not because of the IDF. It shows that the Lebanese people are fed up with them being used as human shield. And Lebanese people are calling out loud, time for peace with Israel. It is time for peace with Israel, because our problem was never, ever with the Lebanese people. It was only with the proxy of the IRGC, the terrorist organization Hezbollah.
With the war in Lebanon waging on and the IDF continuing to target Hezbollah, it's clear that Hezbollah will do everything they can to endanger civilians, while Israel does all they can to protect civilians.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week.
Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning special places of the land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
For nearly 6 weeks here in Israel, families of preschool children with disabilities have been confined to their homes and shelters under constant missile fire from Iran and Hezbollah. Yet while inside, they face other dangers. Structure disappears, routines break down, therapy stops, skills they fought so hard to gain begin to fade. Many children spiral into tantrums or just shut down. Parents are alone, exhausted, and overwhelmed with no support. Pressure can turn into neglect, emotional harm, and even physical abuse. Now, during this ceasefire, Chimes Israel, a 35-year-old nonprofit serving people with disabilities across Israel, is racing to act before more families reach a breaking point. Teams are going into homes, bringing back safety and stability, helping families ease tension, rebuild routines, and restore therapy. So please help them make a difference before it's too late. You can scan the QR code to donate today.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Caleb Ben David, coming to you live from Israel with all of the headline stories from here and across the region. Here are the latest developments. A second round of U.S.-Iran peace talks is set to take place in Islamabad in the coming days. President Donald Trump posting on his Truce social account that U.S. negotiators Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will arrive in the Pakistani capital on Monday evening to meet with their Iranian counterparts. Trump declared that the U.S. will knock out every single power plant and every single bridge in Iran if they don't take what he calls a fair and reasonable deal, adding, "No more Mr. Nice Guy." Now, the 2-week ceasefire between the U.S. is due to end Wednesday, April 22nd, which is also when Israel celebrates Independence Day. A Pakistani mediator said back-channel talks have made progress, with a memorandum of understanding possible soon and a comprehensive deal within 60 days. According to Trump, Iran has agreed to stop funding Hamas, Hezbollah, and hand over its uranium stockpile.
We had to do something. We had to make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. And we're at that. They've agreed to that. They've totally agreed to that. They've agreed to almost everything. So maybe if they can get to the table, there's a difference. They agree. They got to get to the table with a pen. We'll have that over with.
But Iranian officials dispute President Trump's claims, saying his tweets and statements are misleading or, in some cases, just inaccurate.
American side tweets a lot, talks a lot, sometimes confusing, sometimes contradictory. In the same statement, he said other things as well. So I don't want to judge what he means. It is up to American people should decide whether his statements are consistent and are in accordance with the international law or not.
Meanwhile, President Trump is meeting with his top advisors to discuss Iran's renewed closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The urgent consultations come after Iran swiftly reversed its earlier decision to reopen the critical waterway, reimposing restrictions following U.S. declarations that it will maintain a blockade on Iran-linked shipping. Iranian forces reportedly opened fire on 2 ships trying to pass through the strait this weekend. President Trump wrote in that Truth Social post, Iran decided to fire bullets yesterday in the Strait of Hormuz. Many of them were aimed at a French ship and a freighter from the United Kingdom. A total violation of the ceasefire agreement. That wasn't nice, was it? Well, in what is being referred to as Hormuz whiplash, there have been a rapid sequence of reversals over the strait as Iran has shifted from announcing open transport to reimposing restrictions within hours, creating widespread uncertainty over one of the world's most critical shipping lanes. Well, the timeline began Friday afternoon when the Iranian foreign minister announced the strait would be open to all vessels during the ceasefire, a statement immediately welcomed by President Trump. Within hours, some shipping activity resumed and tankers beginning to transit the waterway for the first time in weeks. However, by Saturday morning, Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya Command, which is responsible for military operations, reversed course and announced that the strait was again under strict control, restoring restrictions on free passage. According to reports, at least 20 vessels that were preparing to transit turned back following the announcement, highlighting its immediate impact on maritime traffic. President Trump claims the closure of the strait is only hurting Iran and aiding the U.S., saying many nations are now planning to buy American oil instead. And he had this to say also.
We'll be talking about Iran later. We have very good conversations going on. It's working out very well. They got a little cute, as they have been doing for 47 years. Nobody ever took them on. We took them on. They have no Navy. They have no Air Force. They have no leaders. They have no nothing. Actually, their leaders are, it is regime change. You call that enforced regime change. But we're talking to them. They wanted to close up the strait again, you know, as they've been doing for years. And they can't blackmail us.
Moving to the Lebanon front, despite the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah that was announced by President Trump on Thursday night, 2 IDF soldiers were killed over this weekend and about a dozen wounded in 2 separate incidents in South Lebanon. One of the fallen was named as Reserve Sergeant First Class Lidor Parat, 31, from Ashdod. Parat was killed and 9 others were wounded, including one seriously after being hit by an explosive device in South Lebanon Saturday. In a separate incident, Reserve's Warrant Officer Barak Khalfon, 48, from Adi, was killed while conducting a search for weapons in a building in South Lebanon when an explosive device detonated. The blast killed him and wounded 3 other troops. May their memories be a blessing. But even with these incidents, the U.S. brokered 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah has largely been holding, with no rockets fired from Lebanon across the border since midnight Thursday. Lebanon's army has accused Israel of breaking the ceasefire with limited shelling in several southern villages. The IDF says soldiers identified a terrorist cell that violated the ceasefire understandings and approached troops. The terrorists posed a threat to the troops, and in response, the IDF eliminated them. Additionally struck was an underground shaft in an area south of the forward defense line, along with Hezbollah terrorists who were identified entering into it. In the final 24 hours before the ceasefire, the IDF said it struck more than 380 Hezbollah targets in South Lebanon, including operatives, command centers, and rocket launchers. Now, posting the announcement of the ceasefire, President Trump raised some eyebrows in Israel when he announced that Israel has been banned from targeting Lebanon, writing, "The U.S. will separately work with Lebanon and deal with the Hezbollah situation in an appropriate manner. Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the U.S. Enough is enough." Trump called the ceasefire a potentially historic moment and said he will, at an unspecified date, host Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Lebanese President Joseph Aoun at the White House for talks aimed at a permanent peace agreement.
With Lebanon, it's very exciting. I think we're going to have a deal. We're going to have a meeting, first time in 44 years, and Lebanon will be meeting with Israel, and they're probably going to do it at the White House.
Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it remains on high alert and fully ready to resume fighting if the current fragile, week-long ceasefire collapses or expires without extension on April 22nd. Well, from the moment the ceasefire took place, thousands of displaced Lebanese families have been flooding highways this weekend, attempting to return home in the south. Israeli forces remain deployed in South Lebanon and continue to warn civilians not to return to frontline areas. Defense Minister Israel Katz said that IDF troops will remain in their frontline positions in South Lebanon for the time being.
צה"ל אוחז וימשיך לאחוז בכל המקומות אותם תיאר וכבש. מהלך התמרון הקרקעי לתוך לבנון ותקיפת החיזבאללה בכל רחבי לבנון השיגו הישגים רבים, אבל עדיין לא הושלמו. היעד אותו הגדרנו, פירוק החיזבאללה מנשקו באמצעים צבאיים או מדיניים, היה ונותר יעד המערכה לא אנו מחויבים, כאשר כעת נוצר גם מנוף מדיני משמעותי במעורבות ישירה של נשיא ארצות הברית ומחויבותו ליעד הזה, תוך הפעלת לחץ על ממשלת לבנון.
And with the ceasefires now holding with both Lebanon and Iran, the Home Front Command has eased all restrictions on sporting and cultural events in Israel, beginning with last night. The decision means full activity resumes nationwide, with the public returning to stadiums, performance venues, and events without wartime limitations. The announcement comes just days before Israel's Memorial Day and Independence Day commemorations, which are coming on Tuesday and Wednesday. Now, the Lebanon ceasefire has drawn mixed reactions inside Israel, with northern mayors warning the agreement does not yet guarantee security for border communities. Northern residents are expressing a range of opinions.
האמת שאני כליכודניק וחבר מרכז מאוד 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 מאוכזב מהפסקת האש. ברור לנו שזה לא יחזיק, זה א', ב', אני יודע שביבי אין לו ברירה, אחרי מה שקיבלנו מארצות הברית, את החיבוק הגדול ואת התמיכה במלחמה מול איראן ובכלל, אי אפשר להגיד לטראמפ, אנחנו מתנגדים להפסקת האש, אבל ברור לכולם שזה לא יחזיק, ומה שהכי מאכזב, שאנחנו נמשיך לסבול כתושבי הצפון. רק תושבי הצפון סובלים מחיזבאללה לאורך שנים.
על מה הפסקת אש? הרי אנחנו כבר מכירים את זה 30 שנה אחורה. נתנו להם הרבה פעמים הזדמנויות לנסה ולנצל את ההזדמנויות לשלום, לאחווה, להיות ביחד. הם לא מחפשים שלום, הם מחפשים להשמיד אותנו. הם אומרים את זה. אנחנו רוצים אותם בים. אז איך אפשר לבוא ולהתגונן במצבים כאלה שהילדים שלנו במקלטים? אנחנו לא ראינו, החודש הזה לא ראינו אוויר, רק מקלטים היינו, רק בתוך המקלטים. אי אפשר להתנהל, אין חיים פה.
Tough in the north there. In another diplomatic news, Argentina's President Javier Milei has arrived in Israel for a 3-day visit. It's his third visit here in 3 years. Milei, a staunch defender of Israel, has been chosen to light one of the ceremonial torches during Israel's official Independence Day opening celebration on Tuesday night. This is an honor that is rarely given to foreigners. Now, Milei today visited Jerusalem's Western Wall shrine. He will also hold meetings with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other officials, and is expected to announce a new direct flight route between Ben Gurion Airport and Buenos Aires. And for more on all these stories, we're joined by Dr. Michael Barak. He is a senior researcher at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University. And also Doron Kempel. He is the former deputy commander of the elite Sayeret Matkal Commando Unit. And Dr. Barak, I want to start with you. We have the ceasefire in Lebanon. We have first time direct, at least publicly, direct talks between Israel and Lebanon, but we know the challenges in getting Hezbollah to disarm. How do you assess the chances of some kind of success here, of this ceasefire lasting and actually producing or moving towards a lasting peace?
So first of all, thanks for having me. And look, we have to be realistic. I think that, first of all, it's an historical moment that the Lebanese government is willing to have negotiations with Israel, talking about peace. If it will happen, then it's a huge success both for Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. But I am skeptic. We should be skeptic about it, because if we look on the personality of Joseph Aoun, I think that he is more pragmatic. He is willing to force Israel to withdraw from south of Lebanon by reaching into a diplomatic agreement with Israel. So he's willing to play the game. I don't know. I'm not sure that he will reach to peace. I wish it will be, but there is a lot of pressure on Joseph Aoun, especially from Hezbollah. And if we look on the official mouthpiece of Hezbollah, in his official daily newspaper, El Akhbar, we see that every day is sending messages, threatening messages to Joseph Aoun and the government of Lebanon. Don't play to the hands of United States and Israel. Don't make a peace. If you make a normalization with Israel, then it's a shame. It's a betray in the Lebanon way. And we see that Naim Qassem, the General Secretary of Hezbollah, also threatened that if there will be kind of normalization or peace, then most probably Lebanon will deteriorate to a civil war. We can hear it a lot. So we can see that also there is kind of psychological warfare conducted by Hezbollah, not only against the Lebanese government, but also against the Lebanese army. According to Hezbollah, the Lebanese army is not able to disarm Hezbollah at all. Why is that? Because if you look in the Lebanese army, also according to Hezbollah, the members of the Lebanese army are composed from different sects members, Druze, Shia, Sunni, Christians. So according to Hezbollah, the Shia members of the Lebanese army will not willing to fulfill the instructions of the central government of Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah. And they mentioned, for example, 1985, 1984 and 1975, where the Lebanese army did not listen to the instructions of the central command, and there was a kind of a disorder and civil war. So we see that, and also there is a criticism of Hezbollah against the Lebanese government, why they are not willing, why it's not willing to rehabilitate south of Lebanon. Now, I think we can see that there is a beginning of the displaced people who fled from South Lebanon to Beirut. They're getting back now to south of Lebanon, and the Lebanese government is not doing enough in order to rehabilitate south of Lebanon. So this is another place or another arena that Hezbollah is using in order to criticize the Lebanese government. In other words, the situation doesn't seem swell, and if Joseph Aoun will reach to kind of, I don't know, even a security agreement with Israel, I'm not talking about normalization, I assume that Hezbollah will find a way to deteriorate the situation in Lebanon. So I'm not optimistic about that.
Right, and there is, Doron, there is another element here, and that is Iran. Of course, Israeli officials, when the ceasefire with Iran started, said, well, the ceasefire with Lebanon and the battle against Hezbollah is a separate battleground, a separate front. But how true is that? What is the connection between what's happening in Iran and how that's going to influence on the chances of Israel really securing the northern front and dealing with Hezbollah?
Thank you, Caleb. Let me build on the smart words by Mikhail that looked at the details of what's going on in Lebanon. And let's take two strategic steps back. And in so doing, let's be objective and empathetic, which are the main tools of a strategist. First of all, Hezbollah is working for Iran. Secondly, Iran is working for the Russians and the Chinese. That's why the Americans need to worry about them, because Iran will remain the kinetic power that China, that doesn't want a confrontation with the US, is going to apply. Unless we fix the problem with Iran, unless we, the Israelis, and we, the Americans, fix the problem with Iran, they will forever bother us, and Hezbollah is going to continue shooting missiles. Any truth with the Hezbollah is not going to hold until we fix Iran. Shifting to Iran for a second. The world needs to be thankful for President Trump for taking the initiative and initiating this war with Iran that has a tactical element that in my mind was already achieved, and that is eradicate their military and push this cancer, the Iran regime, out by 5 years. But we're just postponing the cancer. They're going to be reconstituted by the Russians, the Chinese, and the oil that they have, which means that in 5 years, we're going to be exactly where we are today. The implicit strategic objective is to get the Iranians from working for the Chinese and Russians, working for the West, for the Americans. That means regime change. I don't know where we are relative to the regime change, but the Mossad, and let's give credit to the CIA, have done a great work in terms of eradicating level 1, level 2, level 3 of the leadership of the regime, of the IRGC. And I expect that there must be some friendly generals that we have been working with in the last 10 or so years that at some point in time are going to be ready to start an uprising. I don't know if we're weeks away or not. If President Trump decides that the tactical achievement satisfies him, and it sure looks like it, trying to get to some formal agreement with Iran, then we're going to see an agreement in a while, and then it's going to dissipate. It's going to melt over the course of the last 5 years, and we're going to get Hezbollah shooting missiles again. The only way to get rid of that is hopefully that this ceasefire with Iran, US-Iran, is just a timeout. And when we're out of this timeout, whether that was the plan all along, because President Trump is great with head fakes, right? It could have been that this was a timeout planned all along, but I think that he's actually giving a ceasefire and an agreement a chance. But if we get back to fighting, the US and Israel need to take control of the Straits of Hormuz. It needs to be something that we control from here until a new reality. And then secondly, the second military initiative is to complete the regime change. This is what we need to do. One more thing, and I surrender the microphone, is it could very well be that the regime change has already occurred. It's just that all of us who are not in the know are not aware of it. Because ask yourself, who is the US negotiating with? Who decided that they live? Who decided that Galibach is alive? I'm guessing that somebody makes those decisions in the Israeli side and maybe on the US side. So President Trump, I'm giving all the credit to him, by the way, decided whom he negotiates with. Now, who do they report to in Iran? We don't even know if the new Khomeini is alive or not. So it's not clear who they report to, and it could be that there is sufficient disarray within Iran in order to strike some deal and to continue working on it later. We just don't know as civilians. Thank you.
Right. Well, so some of those questions may be answered in the next coming days. Getting back to Lebanon, though, Dr. Brock, there is another country besides Iran that has to play a sort of key role in the equation of any kind of real peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon, and that is Syria. In the past, of course, the Assad regime tried to sabotage any such chances over the border issue, which is in dispute between Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. But of course, President al-Shara or Julani has a totally different approach, especially to Hezbollah. I know you've even suggested the possibility of some military action there. How do you see Syria playing a role as these talks, as this process with Lebanon goes forward?
So right now, Muhammad al-Julani or Ahmad al-Shara is focused on the rehabilitation of Syria. Outside, Ahmad al-Shara wants to show that Syria is not interested in interfering in external issues like in Lebanon. But below the radar, we know that there were already leaked information in social media networks and other platforms that there are discussions between the Syrian regime to United States, even Israel, about how to deal with Hezbollah. And we see also that Hezbollah is very concerned, actually is in panic. We see it in his official platforms. Hezbollah is very afraid that when the moment will come, Ahmad al-Shara will send his army through the Syrian border to Lebanon in order to make sure to clean the dirt of Hezbollah from south of Lebanon. I think also that if we see that if Hezbollah, I assume that if Hezbollah will fulfill his threat against the Lebanese government, if it will go to a normalization with Israel and then the Hezbollah will decide to deteriorate the situation, I think that Israel and maybe the Syrian government will interfere in Lebanon in the name of saving the Lebanese people from the hands of Hezbollah. I think this can be a possible scenario. Everything is possible in the Middle East, but we see that in the last week, we see that the Syrian government has disseminated messages blaming Hezbollah for interfering in the internal issues of Syria. For example, only yesterday, the Syrian regime blamed Hezbollah for cooperating with local Bedouins in south of Syria. They exposed a factory of drones from the time of Bashar al-Assad that was used in order to attack Israel. And according to the Syrian regime, this factory was still in use by Hezbollah and the local Bedouins. In other words, Syria is trying to find excuses or to prepare the ground or to winning the hearts and the minds of the people, that when the moment will come, although they are not saying it officially, but when the moment will come, they will have to focus also on Hezbollah, to remove the threat from Hezbollah. So I don't rule out that the Syrian government, although it denies any interference, it will be involved in such scenario. We have to remember that Ahmad al-Shara got a huge credit from Trump. Donald Trump now is trying to keep Bashar al-Assad, to keep Ahmad al-Shara next to him. So maybe Trump, I assume, maybe he promised him to Ahmad al-Shara that he will give maybe more investments in Syria if he will do that and that. So this is a definitely possible scenario.
Right. We have to remember there's a precedent for Syria attacking or invading Lebanon, though ironically in the past that was for almost the opposite aim of what the present Syrian government would be trying to achieve. Doron, I want to ask you, because you talked about, and President Trump is threatening renewed military action against Iran if the talks should fail. Of course, it's one thing to destroy bridges and power plants, even take out its leaders, but certainly for Israel, and I think really for the rest of the world, the key would be securing that enriched uranium that many believe is buried underground, perhaps at Isfahan. People talk about a kind of commando operation that would have to take place. You, of course, former deputy commander of Sayeret Matkal. You've been involved in commando missions, some perhaps on a slightly smaller scale, bear some resemblance here, but this is a much bigger task. How realistic is it for some kind of, if you want to call it a commando operation, maybe bigger than that, for the U.S. to go in, U.S. forces, maybe with Israeli assistance, and get that enriched uranium out from underground in Iran?
Thank you. I think this is very complicated. It requires large forces on the ground, conquering the whole area in order to secure the operation for whoever needs to dig it out. So this is a very serious operation, and the question is whether it's worth it. So if a ceasefire is achieved and there is some agreement, best of course is to get to that uranium peacefully. If there's not a way to get it peacefully, then my sense is that priority number one is controlling the Strait of Hormuz, which means conquering about 300 to 500 kilometers of the coastline of Iran, holding it, holding the monetary value of all the ships that come out of Iran, and by the way, go to China, thereby applying pressure on China. The chess game, the big chess game is US-China, right? Iran is a smaller chess game. And if the US has the legitimacy to control the Straits of Hormuz and all the flow of oil, then the US has leverage over China and apply pressure on China to apply pressure on Iran if there's anybody to speak with. In summary, I think that it is possible, but very complicated, and I doubt whether it's worth it to put forces on the ground in order to dig out the uranium. Nobody has access to the uranium, right now. I think that the highest priority, if we get back to fighting, is to control the straits and to complete the regime change.
Right. And Dr. Brock, we heard President Trump claim that Iran, hard to believe, but claim that Iran has agreed to stop its support for its proxies like Hezbollah. But if that were the case, or even if, let's take the scenario that Iran is going to come out of this conflict a lot weaker, economically certainly damaged, both on the military side, how strong or how likely could Hezbollah survive or hold its current position without getting the kind of support from Iran that it has gotten for all of its existence until now?
I think this is a game changer. You know, if Iran stops to fund and support Hezbollah, it's a game changer. Hezbollah will be in a very complicated and bad situation. However, we have to remember that Hezbollah, although he got a big fan from Iran, during the years, he managed to build a very extensive infrastructure and channels in South America, in Africa, collaborating with criminal gangs like in Brazil, in Paraguay, in South America, drug cartels in Mexico. So Hezbollah is trying to, until today, is trying to find alternative sources, income sources from the Shia communities also in the triangle borders in Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil. So even if Iran will stop, I don't think it will happen. It never, because this is, this is the big success of Iran. But let's assume it will happen. Then Hezbollah will try to rely more on these external income sources that it built. But I think that it's if Hezbollah will lose the support of Iran, it will fuel the motivation of the sects in Lebanon to take more actions against Hezbollah, even maybe the Druzes that until today they want to show that they are a reliable ally of the Hezbollah. So this is definitely a game changer, but I don't see it happen at all. In the Iranian official mouthpieces, Hezbollah is the pearl, the jewel in the crown of Iran. This is the most successful export of the Iranian revolution. I don't think it happens. Hezbollah also is still helping to Iran to train and to help to the proxies of Iran, if it's in Iraq, if it's in Yemen with the Houthis, even in Nigeria, there are a small group that is there's a sympathy to Iran.
I'm going to just cut you short because there is now a report coming out claiming that Iran has agreed to transfer its enriched uranium to Pakistan. Gentlemen, I don't know the sources. It's just coming out. We'll have to, as President Trump says, we'll see what happens. But I want to thank Doron Kempel, Dr. Michael Barak, for your very interesting analysis today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. Of course, you can stay tuned with us on our broadcasts or go to our app. You see the QR code on the screen. I'm Caleb Ben David, and thank you for joining.
The United States is infiltrated by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and here is how. Welcome back to Axis of Truth. I'm Emily Schrader, and today I'm exposing how the regime is manipulating the American public through a complex network of organizations right on American soil. For weeks on this show, I've been exposing how the media, public figures, celebrities, activists are repeating the same framing, the same talking points, the same distortions that benefit the Islamic Republic of Iran, whether or not they realize it. This is part of an immense psychological warfare effort by the regime for many decades already, and they're playing the long game. Today, I'm going to expose to you how they're doing it inside of the United States. Now, a new report from NUFTI, the National Union for Democracy in Iran, details this long-term strategy by the regime to establish durable influence and manipulation of public opinion inside the United States. Not through traditional espionage, but through institutions, religious centers, schools, nonprofits, and community organizations that operate legally, consistently, and over generations. Now, at the center of this network is the ILTV Foundation, a New York-based nonprofit that owns a 36-story building on Fifth Avenue, a revenue-generating asset that's funded dozens of affiliated organizations across the country. Now, court filings and public reporting have described this foundation as operating under the direction of the Islamic Republic, and through that funding, it's helped build a network that spans multiple states and institutions, and one that's even shaping future generations of Americans for the worse. Now, this foundation itself has acknowledged supporting more than 35 organizations across the United States, including the Islamic Education Center in Potomac, something detailed in the report from NUFTI. Idara-e Jafariya is what it's called in Maryland, and it's part of a broader network as well of mosques, schools, youth programs in states like Virginia, Michigan, and Texas. And that's just what's disclosed that we know about. This model is not unique to the United States either. The regime has used very similar foundations and charitable structures in the UK as well. And that's something that I will be exposing more about in detail in the future. But what you're seeing here is a strategy that adapts to different legal systems while maintaining the same objective: exporting the Islamic Revolution of 1979 to the West, exporting the death cult of Khomeinism. Now, this NUFTI report exposes the regime's replicable model, starting with an anchor property often funded or supported through organizations like ILTV, which provides financial stability and a permanent base. Install clerical leadership that's trained in Iran by the regime, who then sets that ideological direction. And from there, you build out schools, youth programs, and community organizations that spread the ideology
into daily life and into the next generations of the West. Not just religious practice, but education, social networks, and cultural activity. And you can see this model very clearly in the Washington, D.C. area, which the report identifies as the original test case. After an attempt by pro-Khomeini activists to take over the Islamic Center of Washington in 1981, a plot which failed, their strategy shifted. So instead of direct takeovers, the network started moving towards building parallel institutions that they could control and expand over time. From there, it only spread. On American campuses, for example, the Muslim Student Association's Persian-speaking group emerged as a key node. Now, according to FBI assessments and Senate testimony, this group has operated as an extension of the Islamic Republic itself, using the cover of a campus organization to monitor dissidents and disseminate propaganda, and even organize events that promote regime-aligned ideology. These are very similar tactics to what we've seen from the Muslim Brotherhood, also in the United States on campuses. This network has been operating since the 1980s with annual conferences, organized transport of students to protest, and direct lines back to officials that are connected to the Islamic regime. Now, FBI testimony also described this network as one of the Islamic Republic's primary methods that they rely on for intelligence and technical support inside the United States, including monitoring those dissidents and advancing the regime's objectives on American soil, whatever they may be. Now, from campuses, the regime's method expands into communities. Take Maryland, for an example. In Maryland, the Islamic Education Center in Potomac was established using Alavi Foundation support and combined a mosque with a full-time K-12 school on the same property. That structure allows the Khomeinist ideology to be reinforced daily through classrooms, peer networks, and youth programming, not strictly religious services. The center and its associated school received at least $3.6 million in funding from the Alavi Foundation, which is what allows this model from the Islamic Republic to scale and to sustain itself over time. Now, in Virginia, this network also connects to figures like Abu Fazl Nahidian, who was involved in pro-Khomeini organizing in the U.S. for decades and whose network centers around institutions like the Manassas Mosque, as well as earlier ties to the Islamic Education Center in Potomac and Iranian student networks that operate in Washington, D.C. Now, that same ecosystem intersects with the only known Iranian-directed assassination on U.S. soil when Ali Akbar Tabataei was shot in Maryland by Daoud Salahuddin, who was connected to Nahidian's network and operated out of an Iranian student center in Washington before fleeing back to Iran, where he remains today. Now, that same Manassas Mosque that has continued along that path, as this report details, has hosted numerous events marking the Islamic Revolution, has displayed imagery associated with the regime and its leadership, and just a few weeks ago, they held a Ramadan iftar for remembrance of the now-dead terrorist leader, Ali Khamenei, who they referred to as our leader in the United States. Decades later, the regime's network has only expanded, with those mosques and others like it being funded from the same structure and public promotion of regime-aligned positions, including support for Hamas, praise for IRGC figures with American blood on their hands, and more. This is what long-term infrastructure looks like. And before some Jew-hating crank starts saying, well, what about Israel? Don't they fund schools in America? No. And that's despite the fact that Jewish schools in America are obscenely expensive. The state of Israel does not provide support or services or indoctrination, anything close to the way that this death cult of Khomeinism has and is for many decades already. And now let's take a look at Michigan. In Dearborn, roughly 40% of the population is Muslim, and actually mostly Shia. And you don't have just one institution. You have a dense ecosystem of mosques, schools, youth programs, and media initiatives that reinforce one another and really honestly normalize anti-Semitic, anti-American, and pro-terror narratives as part of daily life. For example, in 2020, following the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, a commander responsible for the deaths of hundreds of American service members, the Islamic Center of America in Michigan hosted a vigil praising him, with senior clerics crediting him with striking fear into the enemies of Islam, including the United States.
Who was this general that his presence brought hope to the marginalized and those who were afraid, and brought hatred and fear to the enemies of Islam, particularly United States.
That's an American institution publicly glorifying a man responsible for killing American soldiers. Expanding west in Texas, this model is running across multiple metro areas, including Houston and Dallas, where anchor institutions support full-time schools, youth networks, and outreach programs designed to translate that regime ideology into language that resonates with broader American audiences, including non-Muslims. And this is where the whole effort of the regime starts to connect directly to what we're seeing today on the ground. The regime is extremely effective at identifying social divisions in the West and exploiting them to their advantage, hyper-focusing on perceived grievances of the West and building bridges with radical left groups and even increasingly mainstream groups when they see the chance, such as with Israel. The IRGC and its tentacles are, quite frankly, masters at making marginalized groups feel like they have shared goals, when in fact, they often have opposite goals, such as the LGBTQ movement, which suddenly promotes Palestine without understanding the only thing that Palestinians hate more than Jews, statistically speaking, according to Pew, is gays. Now, of course, we also saw it and see it today when student groups organize pro-regime protests that portray the Islamic Republic and its terror proxies as resistance, blame Jews for all the faults of the world, and sometimes even chant death to America and burn American flags, like we saw with the student anti-Israel encampments after October 7th. The Islamic Republic will attach itself to a social issue and artificially amplify the outrage over the issue, especially in media and social media, all in order to drum up dissatisfaction within American culture and society. We saw it this past month with the disproportionate outrage over a strike on an IRGC base that had a school within its perimeter where dozens of children died. Yet there is little to no public knowledge or understanding of the fact that the regime itself killed hundreds of Iranian children during protests just a number of days earlier. This week, we see it again as economic talking points dominate the conversation when people are conditioned to prioritize gas prices over human lives, which is exactly why figures like Ghalibaf are publicly trolling the United States about oil prices on social media, which the entire Iranian population is cut off from. Yeah, the internet is still off. The reality is that the regime knows what resonates and they also know what divides. And we have a major problem on American campuses. Take a look at what happened at Swarthmore campus this week.
Take another soldier out! Take another soldier out! Iran, you make us proud! Iran, you make us proud!
So students openly cheering for Hezbollah, a U.S.-designated terrorist organization, and cheering for the killing of American soldiers. Really? Now, what this report from Nufti makes clear is that this isn't a handful of bad actors. It's a system deliberately built over decades across multiple states with dozens of institutions, millions of dollars in funding, and direct links back to an illegitimate terrorist regime in Iran. And this is the end result. A network that moves ideas through institutions and normalizes extremism through community structures and exploits the weaknesses of open societies to turn them against themselves. It's time to wake up and fight back against this abuse of our values as Americans or as any person who believes in freedom, equality, and liberal values. It's clear that we are under assault. And now I want to talk about an example from this week that proves exactly why what we just talked about is so critical right now. Because what we saw this week around the ceasefire between the Islamic Republic and the U.S. is not a diplomatic miscommunication. It's a real-time example of the same kind of subversion and narrative manipulation that we just talked about. When President Trump announced the ceasefire, he referenced 10 points that were under discussion for the talks. But almost immediately, the Islamic Republic leaked its own version of events to the international media, and through its media arms, a list of 10 points that were presented to the world as if they were a part of an agreed-upon deal, even though they weren't the same 10 points that were approved, and in many cases, some of these points weren't even a part of any serious negotiation between the two parties. On cue, the Western media immediately ran with it. Public figures ran with it, politicians ran with it, and suddenly you had an entire global conversation built around terms that didn't exist that made the US look incredibly weak, like President Trump had failed in his war objectives. This entire effort was a psyop, and not even a sophisticated one. This was a petty attempt to stir up chaos, shift blame, and get the whole world to start condemning Israel for something that it was never even a part of. Because one of the key elements that they inserted into this fake framework was Lebanon, specifically the idea that a ceasefire somehow included limitations on Israeli action in Lebanon, despite the fact that Israel was not a party to these talks and had not been consulted on any of it. And again, last I checked, Lebanon is not in Iran. And if Iran is negotiating on behalf of Lebanon, that's not a part of the story, that's the entire problem. But once that idea was out there, everything else followed. Suddenly you have people asking, why is Israel violating terms that don't exist? You have world leaders calling for restraint based on conditions that were never agreed to. And the entire conversation shifts away from the regime and onto Israel, which is exactly what this was designed to do by the regime. The White House had to come out and clarify that these 10 points were not part of any agreed deal, and Lebanon was indeed not a part of the ceasefire. And then the regime doubled down by adding another claim in the international media about unfreezing assets, which, again, not agreed to, but by that point it almost doesn't matter because the narrative has already taken hold. The talks started, the talks failed, and now we're watching the next phase with the Strait of Hormuz. But if we don't learn from this, it'll just be the same thing all over again. And what's honestly more concerning than the regime doing this is how many world leaders just went along with it without even understanding what they're talking about. You had members of Congress and European leaders openly calling for a ceasefire in Lebanon without even knowing what the terms were, who was involved, or why there was even a conflict in Lebanon in the first place. Leaders like Keir Starmer, the Foreign Minister Yvette Cooper, Emmanuel Macron, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres all came out demanding Israel respect a non-existent ceasefire in Lebanon because a terrorist dictatorship demands it, even though that same dictatorship doesn't govern Lebanon, doesn't represent Lebanon, and has spent decades undermining Lebanon through Hezbollah. And this is where you see the Islamic regime colonialism in action. In Lebanon, we see a system where a foreign power has inserted itself into another country through force, through proxies, and through violence, and has effectively created a parallel structure of control inside of that country. Now, they've done this in Lebanon through Hezbollah, and they've also done it in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen. And in each case, the result is the same. Weakened governments destabilize societies and populations that are caught in the middle with tens of thousands dead. Now, after doing that for decades, they expect to be treated as a legitimate stakeholder in negotiations about those same countries. And the international community is playing along. Why is the world allowing this international bully to do this? This regime has killed more Muslims over time than any other actor in the region through these proxy wars. And yet when it comes time to push back, what we see is hesitation, excuses, and leaders that are clearly more concerned with avoiding problems than with actually solving them. And the reason for that is very, very simple. Europe are cowards. They are scared of escalation, and they're scared of economic consequences. They're also scared of their own domestic politics, and in that fear, they become completely spineless. They won't even defend the Strait of Hormuz, which they depend on far more than the United States, even when the United States is willing to do it with them as the strongest military in the world. No, they prefer to scapegoat Israel by demanding Israel stand down in Lebanon. This is not just failing their own people, it's also failing the Lebanese people and international law, because the Lebanese more than ever do not want Hezbollah controlling their country. We saw that this week when Israel agreed to direct negotiations, and Hezbollah responded by threatening the government and creating so much instability that Lebanon had to back out.
ولما حكينا بالتفاوض طلع البعض قال شو جايينا من الدبلوماسية. بديله للبعض شو جايين من الحرب تبعك. صار عندنا فوق ال 1400 شهيد، فوق ال 4000 جريح، آلاف المنازل مدمرة، فوق ال1,200,000 نازح عم بيعيشوا حياة صعبة. أي أفضل كان؟ نطول بالنا ونروح على التفاوض ولا منروح على الحرب؟ لا، التفاوض مش تنازل والدبلوماسية مش استسلام. طيب نحن ليه ما هلأ بنقعد بنتفاوض لنوقف هالمآسي ونوقف هالنزف اللي عم بيعاني منه لبنان؟ لا، بدنا ننطر ليصير الوضع أسوأ بكتير وساعتها منروح على التفاوض.
Exactly. So the Lebanese government that is willing to talk to Israel about a diplomatic solution is now being criticized by Hezbollah and threatened by Hezbollah to not do exactly that. They're lobbying against potential peace. And this is what the international community is protecting? A bullying terror proxy actively sabotaging democracy and efforts for peace? A group that's literally threatening a coup in Lebanon. You are emboldening that? The irony here is that Israel is the only one willing to do the job of Europe and the international community for them. UN Resolution 1701 and 1559 require the disarmament of Hezbollah and require that it exist only north of the Litani River. Those resolutions have been in place for years. Billions of dollars have been spent on UN peacekeepers, UNIFIL, to enforce these resolutions, and none of it has ever worked. Hezbollah still armed, still embedded in the south, and still operating. The Lebanese army has repeatedly proven incapable of disarming Hezbollah, so Israel must, because it's Israel who has received 6,500 missiles from Hezbollah in the past 40 days. So when Israel takes action, it's not acting outside international law. It's acting in the vacuum created by the failure to enforce international law. Instead of acknowledging that, people are accusing Israel of war crimes. This is so far beyond a policy failure. It's a civilization committing suicide. And parts of the Democratic Party, some Republicans, and much of Europe are not just failing to stop it, they're helping it along. If we don't learn from all of this, if we continue to allow the Islamic Republic to shape the terms of our debates, then the next time this happens, and there will be a next time, we will watch the exact same playbook unfold all over again. And with that, let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly from this week. Kicking things off with the bad. There is a lot of it this week, but I have to start with one person because this perfectly captures the level of ignorance we're dealing with right now. This week, I ended up arguing on X with Martina Navratilova, the tennis player, which was not really something I had on my bingo card, but here we are. And what was striking about it was not just that she is wrong, it was how confidently wrong she is while speaking on something she clearly does not understand. Because she, like so many others this week, was repeating the claim that Israel's strikes in Lebanon were war crimes and that hundreds of civilians were killed, as if that was an established fact. Except that at the time those claims were being made, there was no way for anyone, including her, to know who was a civilian and who was not, because the numbers coming out of Lebanon don't distinguish between combatants and civilians. But what we do know is that of approximately 254 people killed in those strikes, Israel's confirmed that more than 180 were Hezbollah operatives, and Hezbollah itself has been putting out martyr posters nonstop, which means you're looking at a ratio of around 70% combatants in a wave of strikes that Israel didn't start. Israel didn't start this war. That is not a war crime. But here's the real problem for people like Martina, and she's not alone in this. People are throwing around terms like war crimes based on 20-second video clips of some kind of explosion without having the most basic understanding of what actually makes something a war crime. Because you don't know who the target was, you don't know what intelligence went into that strike, you don't know what precautions were taken, you don't know whether there was advance warning. You do not know whether it was a dual-use site or a strict military objective, and in most of these cases, the people commenting don't even know how to differentiate between a legal strike and an illegal strike, which is the principles of proportionality, distinction, and a military advantage to be gained by carrying out that strike. And yet, people are making crazy legal claims with absolute certainty as a form of performative moral narcissism. And we know because the same people who are now suddenly experts in international law have been completely silent on the Islamic Republic's crimes against its own people, from mass executions to the slaughter of children to the massacre of more than 40,000 protesters. But when Israel acts against a terrorist organization, suddenly Everybody's a lawyer. And that should really tell you everything that you need to know. This isn't about law or civilians. This is about people wanting to feel morally superior without actually doing the work of understanding what they're talking about. And in the process, they're not just misinforming people, they're actually reinforcing the exact narratives that the Islamic Republic is trying to push. So no, Martina, you don't get to declare something a war crime from your phone after watching a clip on social media. That's not how this works. Stick to tennis. Jihadist propaganda doesn't suit you. And now for the ugly story of this week. This is one that's kind of hard to watch, and it should be, because what we just saw in Spain is not some random protest or something done in poor taste. It's something that echoes a very long and very dark history. This week, during an Easter celebration, a giant effigy of Prime Minister Netanyahu was paraded through the streets and during this Easter celebration, and then blown up in front of a crowd that included families and children, with people cheering as it happened. And if you think that looks uncomfortably close to public execution theater, you're not imagining it, because in Spain, that kind of spectacle has a history. This is a country where in 1391, waves of pogroms swept through Jewish communities, with thousands of Jews murdered in the streets by mobs, not quietly, not hidden, but publicly and violently. A country that then created the Spanish Inquisition, where Jews and converts, so-called conversos, were hunted, tortured, and executed in public ceremonies, where people were burned alive in front of crowds. This is a country that in 1492 issued the Alhambra Decree, that expelled tens of thousands of Jews from their homes, forcing them to convert or leave under threat of death. And way before that expulsion, many were already forced into conversion through violence, massacres, and social pressure, with entire communities destroyed. So when you see a crowd gathering during a religious holiday to watch a figure representing the only Jewish state in the world be publicly destroyed, this doesn't exist in a vacuum. It looks like something that's happened there before. And it's not happening in a vacuum today either, because under Pedro Sanchez, Spain has entered a new era of Jew hatred, where anti-Israel rhetoric has bled into something much uglier, where government tone, media framing, and public discourse have really created an environment where this kind of spectacle is not only possible, but accepted. And that should make people pay attention. And now finally, for the good story of this week, actually related to what I just spoke about, the US government finally revoked the green cards of multiple Iranian nationals with direct ties to the Islamic regime. And some of them were arrested by federal agents and are now in ICE custody, facing deportation. Finally! Now, one of them is Saeed Issa Hashemi, who was living in the United States with his wife and child after being granted a green card through the diversity visa program. Hashemi is the son of Masume Ebtekar, better known